At my son's wedding, his bride told me to leave, shouting, "You are not welcome here. Go away within an hour." I had canceled all the wedding payments, and what I had prepared next shocked her to the core. My name is Caleb Montgomery, and I am 68 years old. I have spent 40 years of my life pouring concrete, laying bricks, and building foundations for other people's skyscrapers. My hands are rough, my skin is weathered, and my back aches when it rains. But every callus on my palms was $1 saved for my only son, Jordan. I thought I was building a legacy for him. I thought I was securing his future. But standing in the gilded lobby of the Plaza Hotel in New York City, I realized I had only been building a bank account for a stranger to drain. Last Saturday was supposed to be the proudest day of my life. Jordan was marrying Mackenzie, a woman with a smile as bright as a magazine cover and a heart as cold as the marble floor I was standing on. I had arrived early wearing the tuxedo I had custom made for this day. It was expensive, dignified, and classic. Just like the values I tried to instill in my boy, I was fixing my cufflinks near the grand staircase waiting to see my son. Before the ceremony began, instead I saw her. Mackenzie stormed across the lobby, her face flushed, not with bridal joy but with irritation. She was flanked by her two bridesmaids who looked at me with the same disdain one might look at a stain on a silk sheet. Mackenzie stopped 3 feet away from me, refusing to come closer, as if my presence might infect her perfect white dress. "Caleb, what are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "I told Jordan to handle this. Why are you still here?" I was confused. I smiled, thinking it was pre-wedding jitters. "I am here to walk my son down the aisle." "Mackenzie, I am here to celebrate you." "No," she snapped, cutting me off. Her eyes darted around the lobby, checking if any of her wealthy influencer friends were watching. "Listen to me clearly, because I do not want to repeat myself. You are ruining the aesthetic. We curated this wedding to be modern, chic, and exclusive. Your look, your vibe, it is just too old world. It is too heavy. It does not fit the brand we are launching today." I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. My look. She meant my skin, my age, my history. She meant me. I looked past her shoulder to where Jordan was standing near the elevators. He was looking at the floor, studying the pattern of the carpet, refusing to meet my eyes. My boy. The boy I raised alone after his mother passed. The boy whose college tuition I paid by working double shifts in freezing winters. He stood there silent, letting this woman erase his father. "Jordan," I called out, my voice steady, despite the trembling in my hands. "Jordan, are you hearing this?" He did not look up. He just gave a small, pathetic shrug and turned his back. Mackenzie stepped closer, invading my personal space. "You are not welcome here, Caleb. Go away. Go back to your little construction site or wherever you crawl out from. This is my day. And I will not have it tarnished by your presence." Security. 2 large men in dark suits materialized beside me almost instantly. They had been waiting for a signal. I realized then that this was not a spur of the moment outburst. This was planned. They had planned to kick me out of the wedding I paid for. "Sir," one of the guards said, grabbing my elbow firmly, "we need you to vacate the premises immediately, or we will have to escort you out forcibly." I looked at Mackenzie one last time. She was smirking, a small triumphant twist of her lips that told me she had won. She had the ring, she had the groom, and she thought she had the money. I looked at Jordan's back one last time, hoping he would turn around, hoping he would be the man I taught him to be. He did not move. "Get your hands off me," I told the guard. My voice was low, but it carried the weight of 4 decades of commanding construction crews. The guard let go, surprised by the authority in my tone. "I do not need to be escorted. I know the way. Out." I straightened my jacket, smoothed my tie, and walked out of the revolving doors into the humid New York afternoon. The noise of the city hit me, horns honking, tourists chatting, sirens wailing. It was a stark contrast to the suffocating silence of my heart breaking inside that lobby. I walked 2 blocks without stopping. I needed to put distance between myself and the humiliation. My chest felt tight. I sat down on a bench near Central Park, breathing heavily. People walked by, ignoring the old man in the tuxedo sitting alone on a park bench. They did not know that 20 minutes ago I was the father of the groom, They did not know that the checkbook in my inside pocket was the only reason that party was happening. I pulled out my phone. The screensaver was a picture of Jordan and me at his college graduation. He had his arm around me. Then, he looked proud. Then, now that image felt like a lie. My thumb hovered over the contact list. I could call my sister. I could call my lawyer. But no, I needed to. I talk to someone who could actually fix this. I dialed the number on the back of my American Express black card. It is a heavy card made of titanium, invite only. I earned it not by being an influencer, but by building half the skyline of Jersey City. The phone rang twice. Platinum Centurion Concierge Service. How may I assist you, Mr. Montgomery? A polite female voice answered. I took a deep breath. The sadness was evaporating, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. If I was not welcome, neither was my money. Hello? I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. I need to report a situation regarding the event I am currently sponsoring, the Miller and Montgomery wedding at the Plaza. Is there a problem with the service, sir? The operator asked, concern in her voice. No, I said, staring at the fountain across the street. The service is fine. The payment authorization, however, is no longer valid. I am the sole account holder authorized to approve these charges, correct? Yes, sir. You are the primary and only card holder. Good eye. Want you to cancel all pending transactions related to this event immediately. Everything: the venue rental, the catering contract, the floral arrangements, the band. There was a pause on the other end of the line, a long, stunned silence. Sir, the operator said hesitantly, we are talking about charges totaling over $150,000. The event is likely already underway. If we pull the funding now, the vendors will stop services immediately. The hotel will likely shut down the event within the hour. I know I said I watched a pigeon peck at a crumb on the pavement. I want them to stop services. I want the lights to go out. I want the music to stop. I want the food to be taken away. Sir, are you sure? The operator asked, creating a record for liability. I have never been more sure of anything in my life, I replied. But I am not done. The honeymoon suite in the Maldives, the first-class tickets on Emirates, cancel those too. Non-refundable. I do not care. Let the airline keep the money. I just want the tickets voided so no one can board that plane. Understood. Mr. Montgomery canceled. The refund policy will apply, but the tickets are voided immediately. Is there anything else? Yes. One last thing. The Bridal Boutique. The Custom Dress by Vera Wang. I paid a $12,000 deposit, but the final installment of $18,000 is scheduled to auto-draft tomorrow morning. Stop it. Consider it stopped, sir. Your account is now locked for all high-value transactions until further notice. Do you need me to call the hotel management to inform them of the payment failure? No need, I said, a grim smile touching my lips. They will figure it out when the card is declined for the champagne toast. Thank you for your assistance. I hung up. The phone felt heavy in my hand, like a brick. It was the device that connected me to Jordan. It was how he asked for money, how he sent me photos, how he pretended to care. I looked at the phone one last time, then I opened the back case and pulled out the SIM card. It was a tiny piece of plastic, smaller than a fingernail, but it held my entire history with my son. I walked over to a trash can on the corner of 59th Street. Inside there were half-eaten hot dogs, greasy wrappers, and empty soda bottles. It smelled of rot and garbage. It was fitting. I dropped the SIM card into the trash. It landed on a ketchup-stained napkin. Goodbye. Jordan, I whispered. I turned around and hailed a taxi. Not to go home, but to go to my office. I had a will to rewrite and a legacy to restructure. The wedding was over. The war had just begun. I sat in a booth at a small diner called Lenny's on the corner of 48th and 8th Avenue. It was the kind of place that smelled of old coffee, frying bacon, and honest work. The vinyl seat was cracked and the table wobbled slightly, but it felt more real to me than the marble floors of the Plaza Hotel ever did. I ordered a cheeseburger and fries, total cost $12.50. It was a stark contrast to the $300 per plate. Surf and turf I had just canceled. My phone sat on the table, face up, buzzing incessantly. It was on silent, but the screen lit up every few seconds like a strobe light detailing the chaos unfolding 20 blocks away. I did not need to be there to see it. I knew the terms of the contract I signed with the venue impeccably. Well, the Plaza Hotel does not offer credit. They do not offer grace periods. When the American Express Black Card authorization was revoked, the system would have flagged the account immediately. I watched the notifications roll in mostly from my cousin Marcus, the only one of my relatives who had refused to leave when I was kicked out. He was my eyes and ears inside the disaster zone. First came a text that simply said, "The music just died." Then a minute later, waiters are collecting the champagne flutes from the guests' hands. People looked confused. I took a bite of my burger, savoring the grease and the salt. It tasted like freedom. I closed my eyes and imagined the scene at exactly 6:15. The banquet manager, a man named Mr. Sterling who prided himself on punctuality, would have walked onto the stage. He would have signaled the band leader to cut the sound. The room, which had been filled with the smooth jazz I paid for, would have plunged into an awkward silence. The hum of conversation would have died down, replaced by the clinking of silverware and the confused murmurs of 150 guests. I could see Mackenzie standing in the center of the dance floor, her perfect white dress glowing under the crystal chandeliers. She would be holding her glass ready for the first toast, waiting for the spotlight that would never come. Instead, the house lights would have snapped on harsh and bright, revealing every flaw, every crack in the perfect facade she had tried to build. Marcus sent another text. Mackenzie is screaming at the staff. She is telling them she is an influencer and she will ruin them. I chuckled softly, drawing a strange look from the waitress. Refilling my coffee, Mackenzie did not understand how the real world worked. She thought likes and followers were currency. But in the world of high-end hospitality, cash is king and credit is God. Without my backing, she was just a girl in a dress she could not afford, shouting at people who did not care. I imagined Mr. Sterling maintaining his professional composure, explaining that the master account had been suspended due to suspected fraud reported by the cardholder. He would have explained that, per hotel policy, all services cease immediately until a valid form of payment is presented. That was the moment the waiters would have started clearing the tables, not taking empty plates, but removing full ones. The lobster bisque, the filet mignon, the bottles of Dom Perignon. It was a synchronized retreat, a military operation of asset recovery. Marcus texted again. "This is brutal. The parents just tried to run." I shook my head slowly. The Millers, Mackenzie's parents. They had strutted around the rehearsal dinner yesterday, talking about their investments in tech and their summer home in the Hamptons. I knew better. I had run a background check on them the day Jordan proposed. They were drowning in debt, 3 mortgages on a house worth half of what they owed, and credit scores lower than the temperature outside. They were grifters looking for a payday, and I was the bank, now faced with a $150,000 bill. They would be looking for the nearest exit. I could picture Mr. Miller patting his pockets, pretending he left his wallet in the limousine, sweating through his expensive rented tuxedo. Mrs. Miller would be fanning herself, feigning a fainting spell, anything to avoid pulling out a credit card that she knew would be declined. The humiliation would be absolute. The guests, the wealthy friends Mackenzie wanted to impress so badly, would be whispering behind their hands. They would see the unpaid bill not as a mistake, but as a revelation. The illusion of wealth Mackenzie had crafted so carefully was shattering plate by plate, glass by glass. I took another sip of coffee. It was bitter, but it warmed my chest. The burger was gone, my stomach was full, but my heart felt hollow. This was not triumph. It was tragedy. It was the destruction of my son's happiness. But it was a destruction he had chosen when he let his wife treat me like garbage. I looked around the diner. A young couple sat in the corner sharing a milkshake, laughing. They looked happy. They probably did not have a dime to their names, but they had respect for each other. That used to be me and Jordan's mother. We started with nothing. But we had everything. I looked at the receipt on my table, $12.50. I had worked hard for 40 years to be able to sign a check for $150,000 without blinking. But sitting here, I realized that the $12 burger brought me more peace than the 6-figure wedding ever would have. Money, I realized, is only a tool. It can build a house, or it can destroy a home. Today, I used it to tear down a lie. The phone on the table suddenly stopped buzzing with texts and started ringing with a call. The screen displayed the name Mackenzie, coupled with a picture of her smiling falsely at her bridal shower. I let it ring for a moment, watching the name flash. The waitress walked by and asked if I was going to get that. "I suppose I should," I said. My voice was calm, steady. I picked up the phone and pressed accept. I did not say hello. I just held the phone to my ear and waited. Caleb. The voice on the other end was a shriek so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Are you insane? Do you have any idea what is happening here? They took the food. They turned off the lights. The manager is threatening to call the police if we do not pay immediately. Fix this. Fix this right now. There was no fear in her voice. Only rage. She still thought she was in charge. She still thought she could snap her fingers and I would jump Mackenzie, I said, my voice low and gravelly. I thought you wanted me to leave. You said I was ruining the aesthetic. You are ruining my life, she screamed, ignoring my point. Everyone is staring at me. My parents are being detained in the manager's office because their cards were declined. You need to call the hotel and authorize the payment. You need to come back here and apologize and fix this mess. Or I swear to God, I will make sure you never see Jordan again. I listened to her threats and I felt nothing. The fear of losing my son used to control me. It used to make me write checks I did not want to write. It used to make me swallow insults I should not have swallowed. But that fear was gone, burned away by the disrespect in the lobby. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. You are laughing, she screeched. You think this is funny. I think it is. Educational, Mackenzie, I said. I leaned back in the booth, looking out the window at the rain starting to fall heavily on the New York streets. You told me I was not welcome. You told me to go away. Well, Mackenzie, I respected your wishes. I went away, and I took my wallet with me. You cannot do this, she stammered, her voice finally cracking with the realization of the gravity of the situation. We are married. This is illegal. You promised to pay. I promised to pay for my son's wedding, I said coldly. I did not promise to finance a party for a woman who is ashamed of the man who is paying for it. The contract was in my name. The card is in my name. The money is mine. And since I am not welcome, neither is my money. But we are humiliated, she sobbed, the rage turning into manipulative tears. Everyone knows. Good, I said. Let them know. Let them know that the Montgomery family does not tolerate disrespect. Let them know that you cannot bite the hand that feeds you and expect to keep eating. Caleb, please. She tried switching tactics, her voice dropping to a whisper. Jordan is crying. He is in the bathroom throwing up. He does not know what to do. Then tell him to step up and be a man. I said tell him to pull out his wallet and pay for his wife. But we both know he cannot do that because he has been living off my hard work his entire life, just like you intended to. I am going to sue you, she hissed, the venom returning instantly. You can try, I said. But right now, you have bigger problems. The hotel manager is not going to wait forever, and I believe it is raining quite hard outside. It will be a long walk home in that dress. I did not wait for her response. I pulled the phone away from my ear, pressed the red disconnect button, and then immediately went into the settings. I found her contact number and scrolled down to the bottom of the screen. My finger hovered over the block caller option for a split second. I remembered the day she met me, the fake smile, the limp handshake, the way she looked at my work boots with disgust. I should have done this back then. I pressed block. I put the phone down and signaled the waitress for the check. The diner was warm, the coffee was hot, and for the first time in years, I felt completely and utterly in control. The wedding was erased. Now it was time to erase the rest of the debt, starting with the penthouse they were sleeping in tonight, or rather the penthouse they thought they were sleeping in. I sat in my study, a single lamp illuminating the heavy oak desk where I had signed the contracts that built half this city. The rain was hammering against the window pane, a relentless rhythm that matched the beating of my heart. It was 2 a.m. I was exhausted, physically and emotionally drained, but sleep was impossible. My iPad sat propped up in front of me, displaying a crisp, high-definition feed from the security cameras installed at the Symphony Towers, specifically the hallway outside the penthouse on the 42nd floor. This was the apartment I had let Jordan and Mackenzie live in for the past 2 years. It was a masterpiece of glass and steel with a panoramic view of the skyline. A place that cost more in monthly maintenance fees than most people earned in a year. They called it their home. They told their friends they owned it. But tonight the truth was going to hit them harder than the pavement outside. I saw the elevator doors slide open on the screen. Out stepped the happy couple, except they looked like survivors of a shipwreck. Jordan was missing his jacket, his tie was undone, and his posture was slumped in defeat. Mackenzie was worse. Her hair was a frizzy mess from the humidity. Her mascara was smeared across her cheeks, and she was dragging her feet. The train of her Vera Wang dress was gray with city grime. They had just spent 6 hours being held in a back office at the Plaza Hotel trying to negotiate their release. I knew because I had received notifications every time Jordan tried to use a credit card only to have it declined. Finally, he had to call a pawnbroker friend of mine, a man I had tipped off earlier to come and take his Rolex and the keys to the Porsche. The car was leased in my company name, but I let Jordan pretend he bought it. The lease had been terminated 3 hours ago along with his ego. They walked down the plush carpet of the hallway towards the double mahogany doors of the penthouse. I leaned closer to the screen, watching the moment of realization. Mackenzie reached the door first. She did not even look at the keypad. She just pressed her thumb against the biometric scanner, expecting the satisfying click of the heavy deadbolt retracting. Instead, the small LED light on the panel flashed a harsh, angry red. A robotic voice from the speaker, albeit faint through my iPad, audio confirmed the rejection. Access denied, user not recognized. Mackenzie frowned, wiping her thumb on her dress, thinking it was just wet or dirty. She pressed it again, harder this time, staring at the light, willing it to turn green. Access denied, user not recognized. What is wrong with this stupid thing? She snapped, kicking the bottom of the door. Jordan opened the door. My thumb is not working. Jordan stepped up, looking weary. He placed his hand on the panel I had programmed that lock myself. I had added his prints the day he moved in. And at 6:30 this evening, while eating my burger at the diner, I had remotely wiped the database. The lock now only recognized one master code. Mine. The red light flashed again. Access denied. Jordan tried the keypad, punching in the 6-digit code he used for everything. His birthday followed by hers. Invalid code. System lockout in 3 attempts. Jordan stared at the panel, his face draining of color. He jiggled the handle desperately. The door was solid, immovable. It was a fortress, and they were on the outside. Caleb must have changed the codes. Jordan whispered, his voice trembling. He actually changed the codes. Mackenzie spun around, her eyes wide with disbelief. You are joking, right? He cannot lock us out of our own house. That is illegal. We have rights. Tenants' rights. Jordan looked at her, and for the first time I saw shame in his eyes. We are not tenants, Mackenzie. We never signed a lease. We never paid rent. Dad, just let us stay here. The deed is in his holding company name. Mackenzie let out a scream of frustration that echoed down the empty hallway. She turned, and that was when she saw them. Stacked neatly against the wall near the service elevator were 10 large, heavy-duty black garbage bags. There was no Louis Vuitton luggage. There were no garment bags, just industrial plastic sacks tied with yellow cord. She ran over to them, tearing one open. Inside was her collection of designer shoes dumped in a pile, scuffed and mixed together. She ripped open another. It was her clothes, silk blouses tangled with gym shorts. Everything thrown in haphazardly by the cleaning crew I had hired immediately after the wedding. He threw us out, she gasped, pulling a crushed hat from the bag. He actually threw us out like trash. Jordan sank to the floor, sitting with his back against the wall next to the garbage bags. He put his head in his hands. Call him, Mackenzie ordered, standing over him like a drill sergeant. Call your father right now and tell him if he does not open this door, I am calling the police. Jordan pulled his phone from his pocket. It was the only thing he had left. I watched my own phone on the desk beside me light up. The screen showed his name. Jordan calling. I looked at it. I let it ring. I did not feel the urge to answer. I did not feel the guilt that usually tugged at me when he needed help. Tonight, I was not his savior. I was his mirror, forcing him to look at himself. On the security feed, I saw Jordan lower the phone, his face hopeless. He is not answering. It went straight to voicemail. Call him again, Mackenzie shrieked, kicking his leg forcefully. Do not just sit there, you useless coward. Do something. Fix this. I did not do anything, Jordan yelled back, snapping for the first time. He looked up at her, tears streaming down his face. You are the one who told him to leave. You are the one who humiliated him in front of everyone. You said he ruined the aesthetic, Mackenzie. Well, is this aesthetic enough for you, sleeping in a hallway with garbage bags? Mackenzie stared at him, her mouth open in shock. But it was not regret on her face, it was disgust. She looked at Jordan, not with love, not with partnership, but with the look one gives a broken appliance that can no longer serve its purpose. "You are pathetic," she spat out venomously. "I married you because I thought you had a spine. I thought you came from money. But you are just a poor boy, playing dress-up with daddy. Credit card, aren't you?" She turned away from him, pacing the hallway furiously. She did not care that he was crying. She did not care that they were homeless. She cared that she was losing. Then she stopped. She reached into her bodice and pulled out her phone. Her expression changed instantly. The rage vanished, replaced by a mask of tragic vulnerability. She smoothed her hair slightly, checked her reflection in the darkened window of the hallway, and tapped the Instagram icon I watched on my iPad as she started a live broadcast. The notification popped up on my screen. Mackenzie Miller is live. I tapped on it, switching views. Now, instead of the grainy security footage, I was watching a high-definition close-up of her tear-stained face lit by the cold blue light of her phone screen. "Guys," she whispered into the camera, her voice trembling perfectly. "I do not even know what to say right now. I am literally shaking." The viewer count on her stream started climbing rapidly. Her followers were hungry for wedding content, expecting glamorous shots of the honeymoon suite. Instead, they got a horror show. "My husband's father," she sobbed, wiping away a fake tear. He went crazy. We are sitting in the hallway of our apartment right now. He locked us out. He threw all our stuff in trash bags on our wedding night." The comments started rolling in heart emojis, angry faces, people asking what happened. "He has always hated me," she continued, looking directly into the lens with big, innocent eyes. "He never approved of us. He called me trash. He said Jordan should have married a black woman. He used racial slurs against me, guys. It was so scary. He cut off all the funding for the wedding just because I stood up to him, just because I said I wanted to be treated with respect." I sat back in my chair, stunned by the audacity of the lie. She was playing the race card. She was flipping the script, making me the racist, making me the villain, calling a white woman names. I had never used a slur in my life. I had marched for civil rights. I had built community centers for everyone, regardless of color. But here she was weaponizing my identity against me to save her own reputation. He left us with nothing. She cried, angling the camera to show Jordan slumped on the floor, looking broken. See what he did to his own son, purely out of spite. We have nowhere to go. We are terrified. Please, if anyone knows a lawyer who handles domestic abuse and illegal eviction, please, DM me. We need help. She ended the broadcast, leaving the image of her tragic, tearful face burned onto thousands of screens. I set the iPad down carefully. My hand was not shaking. My heart rate had actually slowed down. Mackenzie thought she had just launched a nuclear missile. She thought she could destroy my reputation with a few tears and a smartphone. She thought the court of public opinion would force me to open the door. She was wrong. She had just given me the greatest gift possible. Evidence. I opened my email and typed a quick message to Alana Hart, my attorney, subject defamation and fraud attachment security footage. Hallway cam, 2 audio enabled. I attached the video file of the last 10 minutes. The video clearly captured her abusing Jordan, kicking him, calling him useless, and admitting she only married him for the money. It captured the fact that I was nowhere near them and that no racial slurs were used. It showed her switching from a screaming banshee to a crying victim. In a split second, I hit send. Then I walked over to the window and looked out at the city lights below. Somewhere down there in the cold, damp hallway of the building, I built my son was sleeping on the floor next to a bag of shoes, and his wife was busy editing her tragedy for likes. "Sleep tight, Mackenzie," I whispered to the empty room, "because tomorrow morning you are going to wake up famous, but not in the way you think. John F. Kennedy International Airport is a place where dreams take flight. But for my son Jordan and his wife Mackenzie, it was the place where reality finally crashed down on them with the weight of a collapsing skyscraper. I was not there in person. I was sitting in my home office 10 miles away, staring at a live video feed on my laptop screen streamed by Silas, a private investigator I had hired specifically for asset recovery. Silas was standing near the Emirates first-class check-in counter, pretending to read a newspaper while holding his phone at just the right angle. I watched Jordan and Mackenzie approach the counter. They looked like refugees from a high-fashion disaster. Jordan was wearing a wrinkled linen suit that cost $2,000 but looked like a rag. Mackenzie was wearing oversized sunglasses, trying to hide her swollen eyes and the shame of the previous night. They were pushing a cart piled high with designer luggage, trying to project an air of confidence they did not possess. I leaned closer to the screen, studying my son. He was nervous. I could tell by the way he kept tapping his passport against the counter, the way his eyes darted around the terminal. He thought he had outsmarted me. He thought that because I had booked the honeymoon tickets months ago through a travel agency, they were safe. He thought I would not remember to cancel a vacation I had already paid for. He was wrong. I remembered everything I watched as Jordan handed over their passports and the printed itinerary to the check-in agent, a young woman with a polite professional smile. She took the documents and began typing on her keyboard. This was the moment. The long pause. The silence that stretches out and wraps around your throat like a noose. I saw the agent's smile falter. She stopped typing. She frowned at her screen, then typed something else harder this time. Jordan leaned over the counter, flashing his charming smile, the one he used to get out of speeding tickets. "Is there a problem?" he asked. I could hear his voice clearly through the audio feed on Silas' phone. "We are in a bit of a rush. We want to get to the lounge before boarding." The agent looked up. Her smile was gone, replaced by a mask of corporate apology. "I am sorry, sir, but I cannot locate your reservation." Mackenzie snapped her head up, looking at the agent over her sunglasses. "What do you mean you cannot locate it? We have the confirmation numbers right there." She pointed a manicured finger at the paper. "I see the numbers, ma'am," the agent said calmly, "but when I enter them into the system, they come up as voided. These tickets were canceled yesterday evening by the purchaser." Jordan's face turned a pale shade of gray. "Canceled?" he stammered. "But that is impossible. My father booked these. He would not cancel the honeymoon." The agent turned her screen slightly so they could see. "Sir, the notes here are very clear." The purchaser, Mr. Caleb Montgomery, contacted the agency directly and issued a full stop on all travel arrangements related to this itinerary. He also requested that we flag the booking in case of an attempt to use it. Mackenzie turned to Jordan and shoved him hard in the chest. "You said you handled it," she hissed. "You said he would cool off. You said he would not go this far." "I did not think he would," Jordan whispered, staring at the agent like she was speaking a foreign language. "He paid for these months ago. Why would he throw that money away?" "Because, Jordan," I said to the empty room in my house, "it is not about the money. It is about the principle. You cannot bite the hand that feeds you and then expect that hand to fly you to paradise." "Please," Jordan begged the agent, grabbing the edge of the counter. "There has to be a mistake. My father is just angry. We are on our honeymoon. Look at my wife. She is crying. Can you just reinstate the tickets? I will pay for them. I will give you my card right now." He pulled out his wallet, fumbling for a credit card. I knew exactly which card he was reaching for. It was a Platinum Visa linked to the Montgomery construction expense account. The agent looked at him with pity. "I am afraid those seats have already been released, sir. The flight is fully booked." "Just put us in business class," Jordan pleaded. "Put us in coach. I do not care. We just need to get out of here." Mackenzie grabbed his arm, digging her nails into his suit jacket. "I am not flying, Coach Jordan. Are you crazy?" The agent shook her head. "Even if I could find you seats, sir, you would have to purchase new tickets at the walk-in rate, which for a same-day international flight to the Maldives is roughly $4,000 per person. Do you want to proceed?" Jordan slapped the company credit card onto the counter. "Yes, just do it. Charge it to this." I watched the card hit the white countertop. It was the final nail in his coffin. He was attempting to use company funds for personal travel after being terminated. It was no longer a family dispute. It was now a crime. The agent picked up the card and swiped it. She waited. She swiped it again. Then she picked up the phone. "I am sorry, sir," she said, her voice dropping an octave. "This card has been reported lost or stolen. The system is instructing me to retain it." "Stolen!" Jordan shouted, his voice cracking, causing people in the line behind them to step back. "It is my card. My name is on it. Look at it. Jordan Montgomery." "It is a corporate card, sir," the agent said, holding it firmly out of his reach. "And the corporate administrator flagged it this morning. Security has been notified." Mackenzie let out a strangled scream of frustration, grabbing her hair. She looked around, realizing that people were filming them. She pulled her sunglasses down to cover her face. "Completely. This is a nightmare," she moaned. "Let's just go, Jordan. Let's just get out of here." But it was too late. From the edge of the screen, I saw movement. Two uniformed officers from the Port Authority Police Department were walking briskly toward the counter. They were not smiling. They were not strolling. They were on a mission. Silas moved his phone slightly to get a better angle. "Jordan Montgomery," one of the officers asked, his voice booming over the noise of the terminal. Jordan spun around, his eyes wide with terror. "Yes, please step away from the counter, sir. Put your hands where we can see them." Jordan held his hands up, trembling violently. "What is this? What is going on? I did not do anything, sir. We have a warrant for your arrest regarding the unauthorized sale of a motor vehicle belonging to Montgomery Construction and attempted fraud involving corporate assets, the Porsche. I thought the car he pawned yesterday to pay the hotel. He sold a car he did not own, and now he was trying to buy plane tickets with a card he was not authorized to use." "Arrest," Jordan stammered, taking a step back, bumping into the luggage cart. No, that is my dad's company. It is a family misunderstanding. You can call him, he will explain. We spoke to Mr. Montgomery legal counsel this morning, sir." The officer reached for his belt, unhooking a pair of steel handcuffs. "The company is pressing charges. You need to turn around. Now." I closed my eyes for a second. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was a sound I knew well from movies and television, but hearing it applied to my own son was a physical blow to my gut. Click, click, click. It was the sound of a door slamming shut, a door between his childhood entitlement and his adult consequences. Jordan began to cry. It was not a dignified silence. It was a messy, loud sobbing. He was begging the officers, begging the ticket agent, begging anyone who would listen. "Mackenzie, do something," he wailed. "Call my dad. Tell him to stop this." I opened my eyes and looked at the screen, watching Mackenzie reaction. She was standing 3 feet away from him, watching her husband being handcuffed in front of 100 strangers. She looked at the officers. Then she looked at Jordan. "Ma'am," the second officer said, turning to her, "are you traveling with him?" Mackenzie froze. I leaned in, wondering if she would finally show some loyalty, wondering if she would step up and comfort the man she promised to love, for better or for worse. "No," she said, her voice clear and cold. "I am not with him. I mean, I know him, but I had nothing to do with this. I did not know he stole anything. He told me he paid for everything." Jordan stopped crying for a second, looking at her with absolute betrayal written on his face. "Mackenzie, I am going to my parents' house," Mackenzie said quickly, grabbing her purse. She did not reach for the luggage. She did not reach for Jordan. She turned her back on him, stepping away from the blast zone like a soldier leaving a fallen comrade. The officers led Jordan away. He was stumbling, struggling to walk while looking back over his shoulder at his wife walking in the opposite direction. People were holding up their phones, recording every second of his humiliation. I saw Silas turn the camera to follow Jordan. The boy I had carried on my shoulders, the boy I had taught to ride a bike, the boy I had built an empire for. He was being marched through Terminal 4 like a common criminal. Head bowed, wrists bound, weeping for a father he had disowned. I reached out and closed the laptop screen. The room went dark. The silence of the house pressed in on me. I felt a tear run down my own cheek, hot and stinging. I did not call the police station. I did not call Alana to arrange bail. I sat there in the darkness, feeling the immense, terrible weight of my love for him. I knew that if I saved him now, he would never be a man. He would always be a child, waiting for Daddy to fix his mistakes. I let him go. The handcuffs were necessary. The jail cell was necessary. The abandonment by his wife was necessary. It was the fire that would burn away the chaff and hopefully leave behind something solid. But God, it hurt. It hurt more than any broken bone I had ever suffered on a construction site. I stood up and walked to the window, watching the clouds gather over the city far away. Somewhere near the airport, rain was falling, washing away the last traces of the wedding that never should have happened. "I am sorry, Jordan," I whispered to the glass. "I am so sorry. But you have to walk this road alone." The doorbell rang at 10 o'clock at night. It was not a polite ring. It was a long, desperate press that echoed through the empty halls of my house. I was sitting in the library reading a book on Roman architecture, trying to quiet the noise in my head caused by the last 48 hours Jordan was in jail, Mackenzie was hiding and the press was camping on my lawn. But when I checked the security monitor, I saw a face I did not expect. It was Robert Miller, Mackenzie's father. He looked terrible. His tuxedo from the wedding was gone, replaced by a rumpled polo shirt and slacks that looked like he had slept in them. His face was pale, his eyes bloodshot, and he was sweating despite the cool night air. I watched him press the button again, looking over his shoulder as if he were being chased. I walked to the front door and opened it. I did not invite him in. I just stood in the doorway, filling the frame, blocking his entry. "Robert," I said, my voice flat. "What do you want?" He pushed past me. He did not ask. He just shoved his way into the foyer, bringing with him the smell of stale scotch and fear. I turned slowly, closing the door until it clicked shut. I did not lock it. "I had a feeling he would be leaving in a hurry soon. I need a drink," Robert said, marching into the living room and heading straight for my bar cart. He poured himself a glass of whiskey with shaking hands, spilling some on the polished wood. He downed it in one gulp and turned to face me. "We need to talk, Caleb. Business to business." He folded my arms, leaning against the archway. "We have no business, Robert. I bought your debt. I foreclosed on your house. You have 30 days to vacate. That is the extent of our business." "No," Robert shouted, his voice cracking. He slammed the glass down. "I need $2 million, cash untraceable, and I need it tonight," I laughed. It was a genuine laugh of disbelief. "You are delusional, Robert. You think I am going to give you $2 million after your daughter spat in my face." "I think you will," Robert said, his eyes narrowing, "because if you do not, I am going to go to that reporter outside your gate, and I am going to tell him the truth about 2004. The laughter died in my throat. The room suddenly felt very cold and very small. 2004. It was a year carved into my memory like a scar onto skin. It was the year of the Bronx Heights project, a low-income housing development I was building. 3 weeks before completion, the scaffolding on the North Tower collapsed. It was a tragedy that haunted my nightmares for 2 decades. 3 men died that day. Good men, men with families. I knew their names, I knew their children. The investigation ruled it an accident, a structural failure due to unforeseen wind shear. But the rumors never went away. People whispered that Caleb Montgomery cut corners. People whispered that I used cheap materials to save a buck. It nearly destroyed my company. It certainly destroyed my peace of mind. I stepped into the room, my eyes locked on his. "What do you know about 2004? "Robert, I know what really happened." Robert said, a smug smile spreading across his sweaty face. "I know that the steel clamps used on that scaffolding were not up to code. I know they were cheap imports from a factory in Shenzhen stamped with fake safety ratings. And I know that if that information comes out now, combined with the hate campaign my daughter is running, you will not just be the angry black father. You will be the negligent contractor who killed 3 people. You will go to prison, Caleb. And your legacy will be dust." I felt a roar in my ears. It was the sound of the collapse, the terrible screech of twisting metal, the dust, the screaming. "I was cleared," I said, my voice low, barely a whisper. "The investigation cleared me. The steel was certified." Robert chuckled, a dry rattling sound. "It was certified because the paperwork was forged, Caleb, and I have the originals. I have the invoices showing the real grade of that steel. I have the shipping manifests showing it came from a scrapyard, not a steel mill. I have it all." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, waving it in the air like a weapon. "This is a copy," he said. "The originals are in a safe deposit box. If I do not call my lawyer by midnight to confirm I have the money, he releases them to the district attorney. You have 2 hours, Caleb. $2 million to keep your freedom, or you die in a cell, just like those men died in the rubble." I stared at him. My heart was pounding, but not from fear. It was pounding from a realization that hit me like a sledgehammer. For 20 years I had asked myself how it happened. I had hired the best inspectors. I had bought the best materials. Or so I thought. I had spent millions of dollars settling lawsuits out of my own pocket to help the widows of those men because I felt responsible. I carried the guilt of their deaths on my back every single day, believing that maybe I had missed something. Maybe I had been careless. But looking at Robert Miller standing in my living room smelling of whiskey and desperation, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I walked over to the armchair and sat down. I crossed my legs and looked at him calmly. "Sit down, Robert," I said. He blinked, confused by my reaction. I said, "I want the money." "Sit down," I repeated, my voice leaving no room for argument. He sat on the edge of the sofa, clutching the paper tight. "You admit it then?" Robert asked, sneering. "You admit you bought cheap steel to deal. Save money." I admitted nothing. I said. I looked at the ceiling, then back at him. "I want to understand something, Robert. You say you have the invoices. You say you know the steel was fake. How exactly do you know that?" "The supplier was a company called Titan Materials. They dissolved a week after the accident. The owner vanished. How do you have their internal documents?" Robert smiled, the arrogance returning. He thought he had won. He thought I was negotiating. Because I was Titan Materials, Caleb, or rather, I was the silent partner. I was the broker who set up the deal. I was the one who found the supplier in China. I was the one who printed the fake safety certificates on my home computer. I sold you that steel. Caleb, I made $100,000 on the difference between the high-grade price you paid and the scrap price I paid, and you never knew. The room was silent. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. It sounded like a countdown. "You," I said quietly. "It was you." "Yes." Me, Robert boasted, leaning back, feeling powerful for the first time in his life. "I was smart. Caleb, I knew you were expanding. I knew you needed materials fast. I saw an opportunity. You were so trusting back then. You thought everyone in this business had honor. You were wrong. So let me get this straight," I said, leaning forward, my eyes boring into his. "You set up a shell company. You defrauded me. You sold me defective safety equipment knowing it would be used to support men working 30 stories up. And when it collapsed, when those men died, you said nothing. You let me take the heat. You let me pay the settlements. You let me carry the guilt for 20 years while you spent your blood money." Robert shrugged. "It was business. Caleb, just business, and now it is business again. $2 million, and the invoices disappear forever. You stay a hero. I get my house back. Everyone wins." I looked at his hands. They were soft, uncalloused hands. Hands that had never held a hammer. Hands that had never dug foundation. They were the hands of a thief and a coward. I stood up slowly. I walked over to the bar cart and poured myself a glass of water. I took a sip, letting the cool liquid wash away the taste of bile in my throat. "You know, Robert," I said, turning to face him, "I always wondered why you were so eager for Jordan to marry Mackenzie. I thought it was just because you were broke and wanted access to my money, but it was more than that, wasn't it? You wanted insurance. You wanted to be so close to me that even if I found out, I couldn't touch you because we would be family." Robert laughed nervously. "Smart man. Shame your son did not inherit your brains. Now where is the money? Transfer it to the Cayman account. I have written down, here." I reached into my pocket, but I did not pull out my phone to make a transfer. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen, turning it around so he could see. The screen was glowing red. It was a recording app, and the timer was running. It had been running since the moment he walked through the door. "What is that?" Robert asked, his smile faltering. "That I said is a confession. 2 decades old, but still very potent. You just admitted to fraud, grand larceny, and involuntary manslaughter. And since you admitted to crossing state lines to secure the materials, I believe that makes it a federal crime." Robert's face went from pale to gray. He lunged for me. "Give me that phone!" I sidestepped him easily. He was drunk and out of shape. I was 68, but I still boxed 3 times a week. He stumbled, crashing into the side table, knocking over a vase. "You think that recording will hold up?" he screamed, scrambling to his feet. "I will deny it. I will say, you coerced me." "Coerced you?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "You broke into my house, you demanded money, and you bragged about your crime vividly. The audio is crystal clear, Robert. And by the way, my security cameras record audio too. You are on 3 different feeds right now." Robert looked around wildly, realizing the trap he had walked into. He looked at the door, then back at me. The desperation was back, but this time it was not the desperation of a beggar. It was the desperation of a trapped rat. "I will kill you," he whispered, pulling a small pocket knife from his jacket. It was a pathetic little blade, something you would use to cut a cigar, but in the hands of a desperate man it was dangerous. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I looked him in the eye with the cold, hard stare of a man who has seen death, and is not afraid of it. "Put it away, Robert," I said. My voice was not loud, but it vibrated with authority. "If you take one step toward me, I will break your arm, and then I will break your other arm, and then I will call the police and tell them you attacked me after confessing to killing 3 men. Do you really want to add attempted murder to your resume?" Robert's hand shook. The knife trembled. He looked at me, then at the door, then at the knife. He let out a sob, a sound of pure defeat, and dropped the knife on the rug. It landed with a dull thud. "Get out," I said. Robert looked up, tears streaming down his face. "Caleb, please, I have nothing. They will put me away for life." "You should have thought of that when you printed those fake certificates," I said. "You should have thought of that when those men fell. You stole 20 years of my peace, Robert. You let me think I was a killer. Now you get to see what it feels like to carry the weight of your own actions." "Go!" I roared, pointing at the door. "Before I change my mind and break your arm anyway." Robert Miller turned and ran. He did not look back. He stumbled out the front door, leaving it wide open, disappearing into the night like the ghost he was about to become. I walked to the door and locked it. Then I hit send on the audio file, emailing it to Alana and to the district attorney of New York. I went back to the living room and sat down. The room was quiet again, but for the first time in 20 years, the silence did not feel heavy. It felt light. It felt clean. The ghosts of the 3 men were still there, but they were no longer looking at me with accusation. They were looking at me with peace. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with air that finally felt fresh. The past was unearthed, and the rot was finally exposed. Now it was time to finish cleaning the house. The morning after Robert Miller fled my house, leaving behind his confession and a lingering smell of cheap whiskey. The front gate buzzer rang again. It was not the police. It was not the press. It was Jordan. I watched him on the monitor. He looked like a man who had been chewed up by the machinery of the legal system and spit out onto the pavement. His expensive linen suit was stained and wrinkled from a night in a holding cell. His hair was matted and his eyes were hollow. He was out on bail, presumably paid for by Mackenzie, pawning something else of value or perhaps borrowing from a friend. I did not buzz him in immediately. I let him stand there for a full minute, letting him feel the weight of the barrier between us. But he was not alone. Mackenzie was standing next to him. She looked different today. Gone was the hysterical influencer from the airport. Gone was the screaming banshee from the hotel lobby. She was wearing a simple white sundress, no makeup and flat shoes. She was holding Jordan's arm with both hands, leaning her head on his shoulder, looking up at the security camera with large, pleading eyes. It was a performance, a meticulously crafted tableau of the repentant couple seeking sanctuary. I pressed the button, unlocking the gate. They walked up the long driveway slowly. I met them on the front porch. I did not invite them inside. The house was my sanctuary, and after the betrayal I had witnessed, I was not ready to let the infection back in. Jordan looked at me, and for a second I saw the little boy who used to scrape his knees and run to me for a Band-Aid. "Dad," he croaked, his voice raspy from crying, "I am sorry, I did not know about the card." I swear I held up a hand, stopping him. "Save it, Jordan, you are a grown man. Ignorance of the law is not a defense." Mackenzie stepped forward, shielding Jordan with her body, strangely protective considering she had abandoned him at the airport less than 24 hours ago. "Caleb, please," she said, her voice soft and trembling. "We know we messed up. We know we hurt you, but you have to listen to us. Not for our sake, but for his." She reached into her purse and pulled out a large manila envelope. She handed it to me with shaking hands. I took it. The envelope was light inside. There was a single sheet of glossy paper. I pulled it out and felt the air leave my lungs. It was a sonogram, a grainy, black and white image of a fetus curled up in the dark safety of the womb. I stared at the image. My hands, which had been steady while holding a recording of a confession, started to tremble. A baby, a grandchild, the continuation of the Montgomery line. Everything I had worked for, everything I had built, suddenly had a new purpose, a future. We found out 3 days before the wedding, Mackenzie whispered, wiping a tear from her cheek. "We were going to announce it at the reception. We wanted it to be a surprise. We are 8 weeks along, Caleb. It is a boy. You are going to have a grandson." I looked up from the picture to Jordan. He was nodding, eager, desperate. "Is it true, Dad? We are having a son. I am going to be a father." For a moment, the anger vanished, the betrayal, the lawsuits, the public humiliation. It all seemed to fade into the background. A grandson, a little boy, I could teach to fish. A little boy, I could show how to lay a brick, how to read a blueprint. A fresh start. I looked at Mackenzie. She was watching me closely, too closely. Her eyes were not filled with the joy of a mother-to-be. They were sharp, calculating. She was gauging my reaction, measuring the melting of my resolve, just like a contractor measures the setting of cement. She knew this was my weak spot. She knew that for all my toughness, I was a man who valued family above all else. "See," she said, stepping closer, her voice gaining confidence. "We are a family, Caleb. You cannot sue your own family. You cannot leave your grandson homeless. You cannot let him be born into poverty while you sit in this big, empty house." The mention of the lawsuit snapped me back to reality. It was like a splash of ice water. The emotional fog lifted, and my brain, the brain of a man who had managed multi-million-dollar logistics for 40 years, kicked back into gear. 8 weeks, I said, looking at the paper again. "Yes, 8 weeks, Mackenzie said, smiling, hopeful. I did the math in my head. 8 weeks meant conception happened 2 months ago. I looked at Jordan. I remembered where he was. 2 months ago. 2 months ago. Jordan and Mackenzie were separated. They had a massive fight about her spending habits. She had kicked him out of the penthouse, or rather the penthouse I owned. Jordan had come to stay here with me. He was a wreck. He slept in his old bedroom for 3 weeks straight. He cried every night. He told me they were done. He told me she wouldn't let him near her. Then there was the business trip I had sent Jordan to Chicago to oversee a site inspection, hoping the work would distract him from the breakup. He was in Chicago for 10 days. He called me every night, formed the hotel lonely and miserable. I looked at Mackenzie again, trying to fit the pieces of the puzzle together. If she was 8 weeks pregnant, that meant she got pregnant exactly during the time Jordan was living with me, and then in Chicago. Unless Jordan sneaked out in the middle of the night, drove into the city to sleep with the woman who had just kicked him out, and then drove back before I woke up at 5 in the morning for breakfast. It was physically impossible. Or unless the baby was not his. The thought hit me with the force of a physical blow. I looked at the sonogram again. It was real, clearly. But who was the father? I looked at Mackenzie, standing there in her white dress, playing the role of the Madonna. She was desperate. She needed the lawsuits dropped. She needed the credit cards turned back on. She needed the penthouse, and she was using this innocent unborn child as a hostage to get it all back. I felt a cold rage settle in my stomach, darker and deeper than before. If she was lying about this, if she was trying to pin another man's child on my son to secure my fortune, she was not just a gold digger. She was a monster, Caleb Jordan said, stepping forward, mistaking my silence for awe. "Please, Dad, let us come home. Let us drop all of this. For the baby." I looked at my son. He believed it. He truly believed it. He was so desperate for her love, so desperate to be a man, that he did not even question the timeline. He had rewritten his own memory to fit her narrative. I slowly put the sonogram back into the envelope. I did not hand it back to them. I placed it on the porch railing, weighing it down with a heavy stone planter. "A grandson," I said slowly. My voice was calm. Too calm. "It creates a legacy." "Yes," Mackenzie said, her eyes lighting up exactly. "Oh, legacy. If this child is a Montgomery," I said, looking her dead in the eye, "then he deserves everything I have. He deserves the trust fund. He deserves the house. He deserves the company. I will reinstate Jordan. I will drop the lawsuit. I will give you the deed to the penthouse today." Jordan let out a sob of relief. "Oh, thank God, Dad. Thank you." But I continued, raising my voice to cut over his gratitude. "There is one condition." Mackenzie's smile faltered just a fraction. "Condition. I am a man of measurements." "Mackenzie," I said, "I do not build on shaky foundations. I verify everything. The soil, the steel, the grade of the concrete. And I will verify this." I pulled out my phone. "I want a paternity test. And not after the birth. I want it now. There are non-invasive prenatal tests available. We can go to my private doctor in the city today. He can draw blood, and we will know in 48 hours if this child shares my DNA. The color drained from Mackenzie's face faster than water down a drain. It was not the reaction of an innocent woman offended by the question. It was the reaction of a guilty woman caught in a lie. "No," she said, taking a step back. "Absolutely not." "Why not?" I asked, stepping forward. "If it is Jordan's child, you have nothing to fear. The test is a simple blood draw from you. It poses zero risk to the baby. It is 99% accurate. It is insulting," she screamed, her voice shrill and defensive. "How dare you? You are questioning my fidelity. You are questioning the legitimacy of your own grandson. You are a sick old man." "I am a careful old man," I corrected, "and the timeline does not add up. Mackenzie, 2 months ago, Jordan was living here in this house, sleeping in the room next to mine. You two were separated. He was in Chicago for 10 days. When exactly did this conception happen?" Jordan looked at me confused. "Dad, what do you mean?" "We were working things out. We saw each other." "Did you?" I asked, looking at Jordan. "Did you sleep with her 2 months ago?" "Jordan, be honest." Jordan looked at, "Be honest, Jordan." Mackenzie seeking the answer, seeking the script. He looked unsure. We met up a few times, right, babe?" Mackenzie grabbed his arm, digging her nails in. "He is trying to confuse you, Jordan. He is trying to get inside your head. He wants to kill this baby. He wants to stress me out so I miscarry. That is what he wants." She turned to me, her face twisted in ugly rage. "You want me to do a test? You want to stick needles in me? You want to risk my baby life just to satisfy your ego? No, we are not doing it. And if you do not let us back in right now, I will tell the press that you tried to force me to abort." The accusation was so vile, so detached from reality, that I actually smiled. It was the smile of a man who had just confirmed his worst suspicions. An innocent woman says, "I will prove it." A guilty woman says, "You are trying to hurt me." "Get off my porch," I said. "What?" Jordan gasped. "Dad, you cannot be serious. It is your grandson." "It is a grandson," I said, pointing at the envelope. "But until I see a DNA test, that says Montgomery on the paper. It is not mine, and neither are you." Mackenzie pulled Jordan's arm violently. "Come on, Jordan," she spat. "He is crazy. He is senile. We do not need him. We will find another way." She dragged him down the steps. Jordan looked back at me, his face a mask of agony. "Dad, please just believe us." I stood like a statue watching them retreat. The envelope still sat on the railing, fluttering in the breeze. I picked it up and looked at the grainy image one last time. I wanted to believe it. God knows I wanted to believe it. I wanted to run after them and hug my son and promise to fix everything. But a builder knows that if you build on a lie, the whole house collapses. Eventually, I walked inside and called Alana. "Alana," I said, as soon as she picked up, add a new motion to the lawsuit. "I want a court-ordered paternity test regarding the alleged pregnancy of Mrs. Mackenzie Miller Montgomery." "You think she is lying?" Alana asked. "I do not think, Alana," I said, looking out the window at the empty driveway. "I know, and I am going to prove it." The boardroom of Montgomery Construction was on the 45th floor, wrapped in floor-to-ceiling glass that offered a panoramic view of the skyline I had helped build. It was a room designed to intimidate. A long table made of polished black walnut sat in the center, surrounded by 12 leather chairs that cost more than my first car. Today, every chair was occupied. The air conditioner hummed silently, but the atmosphere in the room was stifling hot, heavy with tension and the smell of expensive cologne masking nervous sweat. I stood at the head of the table. My hands were resting on the back of my chair, gripping the leather tight enough to turn my knuckles white. I looked down the length of the table at the men and women I had hired to help run my empire. The board of directors. They were looking at their tablets, shuffling papers, avoiding my gaze. They knew something was happening, but they did not know what. They thought perhaps I was stepping down due to the scandal. They thought perhaps I was finally handing the keys to the kingdom over to my son. And then there was Jordan. He sat at the far end of the table, directly opposite me. He was wearing a new suit, likely bought on credit, and he looked surprisingly confident. He leaned back in his chair, tapping a gold pen on the table, staring at me with a look of defiance. He thought he had won. He thought the sonogram was his ace in the hole. He thought that even if I did not believe him completely, I would not dare make a move against him while the grandson narrative was in play. He thought he was untouchable. "Good morning, everyone," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the acoustic perfection of the room. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." There were murmurs of polite greeting. Jordan just smirked. "As you know," I continued, keeping my eyes locked on my son, "the company has been facing a significant amount of negative publicity in the last 48 hours. Allegations of racism abuse and illegal eviction have caused our stock price to dip by 7%. "It is a temporary dip," Caleb, one of the board members, said, a man named Henderson who had always been too soft on Jordan. "The market knows these are personal matters. It will blow over." "It will not blow over," I said, cutting him off, "because the root of the problem is not the press. The root of the problem is leadership, or rather the lack of it." Jordan sat up straighter, his smirk fading slightly. "What are you saying, Dad?" "I am saying." I replied that Montgomery Construction was built on integrity. It was built on the promise that a handshake meant something, and that hard work was the only currency that mattered. Lately, however, it seems we have become a bank for personal vendettas and a playground for entitled children. I pressed a button on the console in front of me. The double doors at the back of the room opened and a man walked in. The room gasped collectively. It was Julian Vance, the CEO of Vance Global, our biggest and our most aggressive competitor. For 30 years, Vance and I had fought for every contract in the city. We were rivals in the truest sense of the word. "What is he doing here?" Jordan demanded, standing up. "This is a closed meeting." "Security." "Sit down, Jordan," I said, my voice whipping across the room like a lash. Julian Vance walked to the front of the room and stood next to me. He placed a thick stack of documents on the table. He did not smile. He looked at the board members like a wolf looking at a pen of sheep. "I have made a decision," I announced. "I am selling my controlling interest in Montgomery Construction. Effective immediately, 51% of my shares are being transferred to Vance Global." The room erupted. Everyone was shouting at once. Henderson was standing up, waving his arms. Jordan looked like he had been shot. "You cannot do this," Jordan screamed. "You cannot sell the company. It is my birthright. It is our legacy." "It was a legacy," I said quietly, raising my voice just enough to cut through the noise until you turned it into a piggy bank for your wife. "Order," I shouted, slamming my hand on the table. "Order." The room fell silent. Julian Vance stepped forward, clearing his throat. "The acquisition is already finalized. The funds have been transferred. However, there is a specific clause in the purchase agreement that Caleb insisted upon, a condition without which the deal would not have gone through." He opened the folder and turned it so everyone could see Clause 4. Section B, the Clean Slate Protocol. "What does that mean?" Henderson asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. "It means," Vance said, "that as the new majority owner, I am restructuring the leadership immediately. As of this moment, the entire board of directors is dissolved, and the position of Vice President of Operations currently held by Jordan Montgomery is eliminated." Jordan face went white. "Eliminated." "Terminated," Vance clarified. "You are all fired." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of 12 wealthy, powerful people realizing they were suddenly unemployed. Caleb Henderson stammered, "You cannot do this." "We have been with you for 20 years. You were with me," I said, looking him in the eye, "until you started approving my son's fraudulent expenses to keep him happy. You were with me until you let the rot set in. You chose the easy path. Now you have to walk it." I looked at Jordan. He was trembling, shaking his head in disbelief. "Dad," he whispered, "this is a joke, right? You are teaching me a lesson." "Okay, I get it. Good lesson. Now call it off. Send Vance away." I picked up my briefcase. "It is not a lesson, Jordan. It is a business transaction. I realized that I could not trust you with my company, and I could not trust this board to control you. So I removed the problem entirely. I turned to Julian Vance. It is all yours. Julian, the keys, the accounts, the headaches. Keep the name or change it. I do not care anymore." I turned and started walking toward the door. The sound of my footsteps on the hardwood floor was the only sound in the room. Dad, Jordan screamed, running around the table, grabbing my arm. "You cannot do this. I have a baby on the way. We have no money. Mackenzie will leave me." I stopped and looked at his hand on my sleeve. Then I looked up at his face. It was the face of a man who had never been told no in his life. "If she leaves you because you have no money, Jordan," I said softly, "then she never loved you. And as for the baby, if it is truly a Montgomery, I will provide for it personally, but I will not provide for you." I pulled my arm free. Security. 2 large men wearing Vance Global uniforms stepped into the room. They were not the friendly guards Jordan knew. They were professionals, indifferent and efficient. Escort. "Mr. Montgomery out of the building," I said. "Remove his access credentials immediately." One of the guards stepped forward, blocking Jordan's path. "Sir, I need your ID badge, your phone, and your company car keys." Jordan looked at the guard, then at me, expecting me to intervene, expecting the safety net to appear at the last second. "Give them to him, Jordan," I said. Jordan reached into his pocket slowly. His hand was shaking so badly he dropped the keys on the table. The clatter sounded like a gunshot. He unclipped his badge, the badge I'd given him on his 25th birthday, and placed it next to the keys. Then he put his phone down. "My health insurance," he whispered, staring at the items. "My insurance is through the company, the baby, the prenatal care." "Cobra is available for 18 months, I said coldly. "You will have to pay the premiums yourself. Welcome to the real world, son." The guard took Jordan by the elbow. "Come with me, sir." Jordan tried to pull away. "Do not touch me. I can walk." "Then walk," I said. "Walk out of here and go find a job that you earn. Go find a life that is yours." I watched as the guards guided him out of the boardroom. The board members were packing their things hurriedly, afraid to look at me. Jordan looked back once at the doorway. His eyes were filled with a mixture of hatred and terror. It was a look I would never forget. When the doors closed, leaving me alone with Julian Vance and the empty chairs, I felt a wave of exhaustion hit me so hard I almost fell. Julian looked at me, nodding respectfully. "You are a hard man, Caleb." "I am a builder, Julian," I said, leaning against the table. "If a beam is rotten, you replace it. You do not paint over it. You do not prop it up. You tear it out before it brings the whole house down." I walked over to the window, looking down at the city streets below. Somewhere down there, Jordan was walking out onto the sidewalk holding a cardboard box stripped of his title, his income, and his ego. It felt like I had just cut off my own arm without anesthesia. The pain was blinding, searing hot and deep. But as I looked at the horizon, I knew the infection was gone. The company was safe. The legacy was safe. And Jordan, for the first time in his life, was free, whether he knew it or not. He was free from the shadow of my money. He was free to succeed, or fail on his own merits. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass and let one single tear slide down my cheek. "Goodbye. Vice President Montgomery," I whispered. "Hello, Jordan. Now the real test begins. Now we see if the man can survive without the name." I sat in the darkness of my living room, illuminated only by the flickering light of the 60-inch television screen. It was 10 o'clock in the morning, but I had drawn the curtains tight. The world outside was too bright, too loud, and too full of judgment. I was watching the morning news, a national talk show that usually featured cooking segments and celebrity gossip. Today, however, the main attraction was the destruction of my life. On the screen sat Mackenzie. She was wearing a high-necked black dress, modest and somber, contrasting sharply with the flashy designer clothes she usually wore. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and she wore no jewelry. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, trembling visibly for the high-definition cameras. The host, a woman known for her sympathetic nodding, leaned in close, her face a mask of concern. "Tell us, Mackenzie," the host said, her voice soft and encouraging. "Tell us why you really left that penthouse. It was not just about the money, was it?" Mackenzie looked down at her hands, then slowly lifted her tear-filled eyes to the camera. It was a masterclass in acting. I had seen her scream at waiters. I had seen her throw shoes at my son. I had seen her belittle her own parents. But this was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. It was never about the money. Mackenzie whispered, dabbing her eye with a tissue. The money was just a way to control us, to control me. Caleb Montgomery is a powerful man. He is a wealthy man, and he used that wealth to make me feel like I owed him. She paused, taking a shaky breath. The host reached out and touched her hand, urging her to continue. "He made inappropriate advances," Mackenzie said. The words hung in the air like toxic gas. "He would come to the apartment when Jordan was at work. He would make comments about my body, about my clothes. He would stand too close. He would touch my shoulder, my hair. It started small, but then last week he cornered me in the kitchen. He told me that if I wanted to keep the lifestyle I had, I needed to be more grateful. I sat in my armchair, gripping the armrest so hard I thought the wood might splinter. The accusation hit me with the force of a physical blow. It was the oldest and most dangerous lie in the book, a young white woman accusing an older black man of sexual predatory behavior. It was a lie that had gotten men like me killed in the past. It was a lie that ignited lynch mobs and burned down neighborhoods. Mackenzie knew exactly what she was doing. She was not just attacking my character, she was weaponizing history against me. He tried to kiss me. Mackenzie sobbed, burying her face in her hands. He tried to force himself on me, and when I pushed him away, he got angry. That is when he threatened to cut us off. That is when he evicted. Us. He is punishing me for saying no. The audience gasped. The host looked horrified. "You are so brave for speaking up," the host said. "This is a safe space, Mackenzie. We believe you." I stared at the screen, feeling a cold rage spread through my veins. It was vile, it was disgusting, and it was devastating, in the court of public opinion. I was no longer just a strict father or a greedy businessman. I was a monster. I was a predator exploiting my daughter-in-law. I reached for the remote to turn it off. But before I could press the button, the room was suddenly bathed in flashing blue and red lights. The colors danced across the walls, spinning through the gaps in the curtains. I did not need to look outside to know what was happening. The sound of sirens cut through the morning air, wailing closer and closer, tires screeching on the asphalt outside my gate. Then came the voice, amplified by a megaphone distorted and harsh. "Caleb Montgomery, this is the Alpine Police Department. We have a warrant for your arrest and a warrant to search the premises. Come out with your hands up." I stood up slowly, my knees popped. My back ached, but I stood tall. I was innocent. I had built this house with honest money, and I had lived a life of discipline. I would not crawl out of my own front door like a criminal. I walked to the foyer and opened the heavy oak door. The scene outside was chaotic. 3 police cruisers were parked on my lawn, their wheels crushing the hydrangeas I had planted with my late wife. Officers in tactical gear were crouched behind the car doors, guns drawn, aiming directly at my chest. Beyond the gate, a crowd had gathered. Neighbors, people I had lived next to for 20 years, were standing there pointing, filming with their phones, whispering. They looked at me with fear and disgust. The accusation on the television had traveled faster than the speed of light. "Walk forward slowly," one of the officers shouted. "Keep your hands visible." I walked down the steps one by one. I did not run. I did not shout. I stopped at the bottom of the stairs. "Turn around. Place your hands on your head." I complied. I felt rough hands grab my wrists, pulling them behind my back. The cold steel of handcuffs clicked shut for the second time in this family story. First, my son, now me. But unlike Jordan, I did not cry. I did not beg. I stood silent, a statue of dignity amidst the madness. "You are under arrest for sexual battery and harassment," the officer said, reciting my rights mechanically. "We are also executing a search warrant for any digital devices, computers, and security recordings that may contain evidence of the alleged crimes." They led me to the back of a squad car, pushing my head down as I slid into the hard plastic seat. I watched through the window as they stormed into my house. They did not wipe their feet. They marched in with muddy boots, tearing through the sanctity of my home. I saw them carrying out boxes, my laptop, my hard drives, my phone. They were looking for the secret stash of a pervert. They were looking for the hidden photos or the threatening texts that Mackenzie claimed existed. Minutes turned into an hour. I sat in the baking heat of the police car, watching my life being dismantled. The neighbors were still watching, judging. Some were shaking their heads. Others looked gleeful, enjoying the fall of the rich man. Finally, a detective walked over to the car. He was a tall man with a weary face. Detective Miller, no relation to Mackenzie, thankfully. He opened the back door and leaned in. "Mr. Montgomery," he said, his voice tired, "we are almost done here. We have seized your electronics. We are going to take you down to the station for processing. Do you have anything you want to say before we go?" I looked at him. I looked past him to the front door of my house, which was standing wide open. I looked at the ceiling of the front porch where a small white disc blinked silently. "Yes, detective," I said. My voice was raspy, but clear. "I have something to say." The detective pulled out a notebook. "Go ahead. You are looking for evidence," I said. "You are looking for proof of what happened in my kitchen last week, or rather what Mackenzie claims happened." "That is correct," the detective said. "She claims you assaulted her in your kitchen on Tuesday afternoon. We are looking for anything that corroborates or disproves that." I leaned back against the hard seat, looking him dead in the eye. "You are looking in the wrong place, detective. You are taking my laptops and my phones, but you are missing the most important witness." The detective frowned. "What witness?" "You live alone." "Mr. Montgomery?" "I do," I said. "But I am a contractor. Detective, I build secure environments. I build panic rooms for billionaires and vaults for banks. Do you think I would live in a house without insurance?" I nodded my head toward the open front door, toward the living room ceiling visible through the window. "Go back inside. Detective, look at the smoke detector in the center of the living room ceiling, and look at the motion sensor in the corner of the kitchen. Look closely." The detective narrowed his eyes. "They look like standard alarm sensors." "They are not," I said, a small cold smile touching my lips. "They are high-definition 4K cameras with audio recording capabilities. They upload directly to a cloud server in Switzerland, specifically to prevent tampering during incidents like this." The detective paused, his pen hovering over the paper. "You record the inside of your own house?" he asked. "I record everything I said. Since my wife passed, I have had trust issues. Detective, and when my son brought that woman into my life, those issues saved me." I took a deep breath, letting the truth sink in. "If you access that server, you will see Tuesday afternoon. You will see Mackenzie come into my kitchen. You will see her ask me for money. You will see me refuse. You will see her throw a glass of water at me, scream that she hates me, and then storm out. You will see that I never touched her, I never moved from my chair, and I certainly never assaulted her." The detective stared at me for a long moment. He was assessing me, reading my body language, looking for the lie, but there was no lie. There was only the calm certainty of a man who had planned for the worst. "If that footage exists, Mr. Montgomery," the detective said slowly, "then Mrs. Montgomery just committed a felony, filing a false police report and perjury." "It exists," I said, "and it has audio. The password to the server is Justice1956. The detective closed his notebook. He looked at the house, then back at me. He stood up and signaled to one of the officers. "Get him out of the car," he ordered. "Uncuff him." "What?" the officer asked, confused. "Uncuff him," the detective repeated louder. "And get the tech team back inside. We need to access a smoke detector immediately." The officer opened the door and unlocked the handcuffs, rubbing my wrists apologetically. I stepped out of the car, rubbing the red marks on my skin. The neighbors were still watching, confused by the turn of events. I did not look at them. I looked at the camera crew from the news station who had just arrived, hoping to catch my perp walk. I adjusted my shirt, I smoothed my hair, and I looked directly into the lens of the news camera, sending a message to Mackenzie wherever she was watching. "You wanted to show Mackenzie," I thought. "You wanted to be a star. Well, get ready for your close-up, because the camera does not lie, and neither do I." The technical officer plugged a cable into the back of my 60-inch television screen, turning my living room from a crime scene into a cinema of truth. The large black screen flickered to life, displaying the interface of my secure cloud server. Detective Miller stood with his arms crossed, his face grim, expecting to see a grainy video of a domestic dispute. The other officers gathered around notebooks, forgotten, their eyes glued to the monitor. I sat on the sofa, rubbing my wrists where the handcuffs had been, feeling the blood return to my hands. But my heart remained cold as ice. The video file loaded. The timestamp read, Tuesday, 2:14 p.m. The angle was high and wide, covering the entire open-plan kitchen and living area. The audio was crisp, picking up the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock. On the screen, Mackenzie stood by the kitchen island. She was wearing the same dress she had described on the talk show, but her demeanor was not that of a victim. She was pacing back and forth, holding a glass of water. I was sitting in my armchair, calmly reading a newspaper. Suddenly, Mackenzie threw the glass of water on the floor. It shattered violently. shards of glass skittering across the hardwood. She screamed a high-pitched sound that made the officers in the room flinch. I watched myself on the screen. I did not flinch. I simply lowered the newspaper, looked at the mess, and then looked at her. I stood up slowly and walked out of the frame, heading toward my study, locking the door behind me. That was where the police expected the video to end. That was where Mackenzie's story began. But the camera kept rolling, and that was when the real horror show started. Alone in the kitchen, Mackenzie checked the hallway to make sure I was gone. Then she walked over to the reflective glass of the oven door, using it as a mirror. She smoothed her hair back, and then with a sudden violent motion, she grabbed the collar of her expensive silk blouse and ripped it downward. The sound of the fabric tearing was sharp and loud, like a gunshot in the quiet room. She ripped it again, exposing her shoulder and her bra. Detective Miller took a sharp breath, stepping closer to the screen. Mackenzie was not done. She pinched the skin on her upper arm hard, twisting the flesh until red marks appeared. She slapped her own face 3 times hard enough to leave a handprint. Then she walked over to the sink, turned on the tap and splashed water onto her eyes, rubbing them vigorously until her mascara smeared and her eyes turned red and puffy. She stepped back and looked at her reflection, inspecting her handiboard. She smiled. It was a chilling, satisfied smile, like an artist admiring a finished sculpture. Then she began to rehearse. "Please, Caleb, stop," she whispered to the empty room. "No louder." She cleared her throat and tried again. "Please, Caleb, stop. Do not touch me there." "No, that is not convincing enough." She took a deep breath, threw her head back, and let out a sob that sounded heartbreakingly real. "Please get away from me. You are hurting me." She practiced the lie 3 times, refining the pitch, refining the terror until it sounded perfect, until it sounded exactly like the story she had just told on national television. Then she pulled her phone from her pocket. She dialed a number, putting it on speaker. The audio picked up the ringing tone clearly. "Hey, baby," a male voice answered. It was not Jordan's voice. It was deeper, smoother. "Hey," she said, dropping the act instantly. Her voice was bored, irritated. "Did you get the money?" the man asked. "Not yet," she said, grabbing a broom and sweeping the glass. She had broken, kicking the shards under the fridge. "This old man is tighter than I thought. He is stubborn. But do not worry. I have a plan. B, I am going to nuke him. Nuke him." The man laughed. "How I am going to say he touched me," she said, examining her nails. "I am going to say he tried to rape me in the kitchen." There was a silence on the phone. Then the man whistled low. "Damn, Kenzie, that is heavy. You think people will believe that?" "Of course they will," she scoffed, leaning against the counter. "He is a big, scary black man holding a grudge, and I am a petite white girl crying wolf. The world loves a damsel in distress, especially when the villain fits the profile. I will ruin him. I will take his money, his house, and his reputation, and then you and I can finally buy that condo in Miami." "You are evil, girl," the man said, laughing. "I am practical," she corrected. "And I am sick of pretending to like this family, sick of Jordan, weak ass, and sick of this dirty old yard ape staring at me like he knows everything." The slur hung in the air of my living room, heavy and toxic, yard ape. It was a derogatory term from the Deep South, a term used to dehumanize black men, to call them animals. "I will be there in an hour," she said to the phone. "I just need to go to the police station and file the report. Make sure you have the champagne ready. We are going to be rich." She hung up, looked around the kitchen one last time, tousled her hair to look more distressed, and walked out the front door, leaving the shattered glass and the shattered truth behind her. The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in my living room was absolute. It was a silence so profound you could hear the dust settling. No one moved. No one spoke. The officers looked at the floor, at the walls, anywhere but at me. The shame in the room was palpable, but this time it did not belong to me. Detective Miller was the first to move. He let out a long, slow exhale that sounded like a tire deflating. He ran a hand down his face, rubbing his eyes as if trying to erase the image of Mackenzie smiling after slapping herself. "Jesus," he whispered. His voice was hoarse. He turned to me slowly. His face was pale. The aggression, the suspicion, the professional detachment. It was all gone, replaced by a look of profound respect and deep apology. "Mr. Montgomery," the detective said quietly, I do not know what to say." You do not have to say anything, Detective, I said, sitting back in my chair. I just want you to do your job. Detective Miller nodded sharply. He turned to the tech officer. Make 3 copies of that file immediately. Secure the original on the server. Chain of custody. Starts now. He looked at the other officers. Get the search team out of here. Put everything back exactly where you found it. Do not leave a single smudge on this man furniture. Then he walked over to me. He did not stand over me. He crouched down so he was at eye level. He looked me in the eye, man to man. Mr. Montgomery, he said solemnly, I apologize on behalf of this department. And on behalf of myself, we apologize. We almost destroyed an innocent man. Life today, based on the word of a sociopath. That video is not just defense evidence. It is a smoking gun for filing a false report, perjury and attempted extortion. Is she going to be arrested? I asked, my voice steady. Detective Miller stood up, his jaw set tight. I am going to the station right now to draft the warrant. She will be in cuffs before sunset. And Mr. Montgomery, regarding the racial slurs used in the commission of a crime we will be looking into. Hate crime enhancements as well. He extended his hand. It was a breach of protocol, perhaps, but it was a necessary human gesture. I looked at his hand, then I shook it. His grip was firm. Thank you, Detective, I said. The police cleared out of my house within 10 minutes. They moved with a different energy. Now respectful, quiet, apologizing as they went. They were no longer invaders. They were allies who had realized they were fighting on the wrong side. When the last cruiser pulled away, I was left alone in the silence of my home. But I did not rest. The war was not over. Mackenzie was still on. TV playing the victim. The detective said she would be arrested by sunset, but sunset was hours away. In the world of the internet, hours were decades. By sunset, my reputation could be irretrievably burned. I picked up my phone and dialed Alana. Did you see the news? She asked, her voice tight with panic. Caleb, they are crucifying you. I saw it, I said calmly. And I have something for you. Check your email. I just forwarded you a video file. There was a pause while she opened it. I heard her clicking on her keyboard. Then I heard a gasp. Then I heard a curse word that Alana, a deacon in her church, never used. My God, she breathed. Caleb, this is nuclear. It is the truth, I said. What do you want me to do with it? Alana asked. Her voice was trembling with the adrenaline of a lawyer who has just been handed the case-winning weapon. Do you want me to submit it to the district attorney? The police already have it, I said. But the legal system is too slow. Alana, she is destroying me on national television right now. I want you to leak it. Leak it? Alana asked. You mean to the press? I mean to everyone. I said, my voice cold and hard. Send it to TMZ, send it to the Shade Room, send it to the Nightly News, send it to the network that is currently interviewing her. Tell them they are harboring a felon. I want that video on every screen in America within the hour. Caleb, Alana warned, once we do that, there is no going back. She will be destroyed. Not just legally, but socially. She will be hunted. Good, I said. She tried to ruin my life, Alana. She tried to put me in a cage. She used my race against me. She used my son against me. She used an unborn child against me. I have no mercy left. Do it. I hung up the phone and walked to the window. I looked out at the spot where the crowd had stood earlier, where they had screamed shame at me. The crowd was gone now, but the paint was still on my driveway. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. I stood in the exact spot where Mackenzie had staged her performance. I looked at the oven door where she had checked her reflection. I took a sip of water and waited. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from Twitter, then another. Then a deluge. The hashtag Boycott Montgomery Construction had vanished, replaced by a new trending topic, #1 in the world. Mackenzie Miller exposed. I turned on the TV. The talk show was still on, but the host looked pale. She was touching her earpiece, listening to a producer screaming in her ear. Mackenzie looked confused, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. We have breaking news, the host stammered, looking at the camera with wide, fearful eyes. We need to cut to a commercial break immediately. I smiled. The hunter had just become the hunted, and the hunt was on. The Superior Court of New Jersey was a building I knew well, not because I had spent time in the defendant chair, but because my company had poured the concrete for the foundation 30 years ago. I knew exactly how thick the walls were. I knew exactly how much steel reinforced the floor beneath my feet. But as I sat there in the heavy oak chair wearing my best navy suit, I realized that the strongest foundation in this room was not made of concrete. It was made of truth. The courtroom was packed. The gallery was filled with reporters, their pens scratching furiously on notepads, trying to capture every detail of the scandal that had captivated the state. Mackenzie sat at the plaintiff table looking fragile and small. She was wearing a pale blue cardigan and a skirt that covered her knees, clutching a tissue like a lifeline. Her lawyer, a man named Mr. Sterling, looked confident, shuffling papers and whispering in her ear. They thought they had a case. They thought the video I had leaked to the press was inadmissible or that they could spin it as a deep fake. But they had forgotten one thing. In a court of law, you cannot spin perjury. My lawyer, Alana Hart, stood up. She did not pace, she did not shout. She stood perfectly still, a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. She smoothed her skirt, adjusted her glasses, and looked directly at Mackenzie, who was now sitting in the witness stand. Mrs. Montgomery, Alana began, her voice cool and professional. You stated under oath 10 minutes ago that on Tuesday afternoon, Caleb Montgomery physically cornered you in his kitchen and attempted to assault you. Is that correct? Yes, Mackenzie whispered, her voice trembling perfectly. It was terrifying. He was so angry. And you stated, Alana continued, looking at her notes, that you fled the house immediately afterward in a state of extreme distress, fearing for your life. Yes, Mackenzie said, wiping a tear. I ran to my car. I was shaking so bad I could barely drive. Alana nodded slowly. She walked over to the exhibit table and picked up a remote control. Your Honor, Alana said, turning to the judge, a stern woman named Justice Reynolds, who had no patience for theatrics. The defense would like to play Exhibit A again, specifically the audio time-stamped immediately after Mr. Montgomery left the room. Objection, Sterling shouted, standing up. The video has already been seen by the public. It is prejudicial, overruled, Justice Reynolds said, looking over her glasses. The jury needs to hear the context. Proceed, counsel. Alana pointed the remote at the large screen mounted on the wall. The video played again. The silence of the kitchen. The sound of Mackenzie ripping her own blouse. The sound of her practicing her fake sobs. Then came the phone call. The audio filled the courtroom crisp and clear, amplified by the high-quality speakers. I am going to nuke him, Mackenzie's voice on the recording sneered, devoid of any fear. I am going to say, he touched me. I am going to say, he tried to rape me. The jury. 12. Ordinary citizens looked at Mackenzie with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. A young woman in the back row covered her mouth. Alana paused the video right after the racial slur. Yard ape, rang out Mrs. Montgomery. Alana said, her voice hardening. You testified that you were terrified. You testified that you were a victim. Yet here we see you standing in the very kitchen where you claim to have been assaulted, calmly plotting to destroy a man. Reputation for money. Can you explain this discrepancy to the jury? Mackenzie shifted in her seat. Her face was pale, but her eyes were darting around, looking for an escape, looking for a lie that would stick. I was in shock, she stammered. That was a trauma response. I was trying to regain control of the situation. I was calling my therapist. Your therapist? Alana asked, raising an eyebrow. You called the person on the other end of the line. Baby, you discussed buying a condo in Miami with your therapist. Is that standard medical practice? Mackenzie opened her mouth, but no sound came out. And let us discuss the terminology. Alana continued, stepping closer to the witness stand. You referred to my client, a respected businessman, and your father-in-law as a yard ape. Do you know the historical weight of that term, Mrs. Montgomery? Do you understand that it is a racial slur used to dehumanize black men? I did not mean it like that, Mackenzie said, her voice rising, getting defensive. It was just a word. I was angry. He was being cheap. He was cutting us off. So you admit you were angry about money, Alana pressed. You admit that this entire allegation, the police report, the restraining order, the media circus, was all because Caleb Montgomery stopped paying your credit card bills. No, Mackenzie shouted, gripping the railing of the witness stand. It is not about the bills. It is about control. He thinks he owns us just because he has money. He thinks he can dictate where we live and what we wear. He is a tyrant. Alana smiled. It was a small, cold smile. The trap had snapped shut. So you lied about the assault to teach him a lesson. Is that it? You filed a false police report to punish him for closing the wallet. I did what I had to do, Mackenzie screamed, losing her composure entirely. The mask of the fragile victim slipped away, revealing the entitled rage beneath. You do not understand what it is like to deal with him. He is impossible. He sits in that big house judging everyone hoarding his wealth. He does not deserve it. He is just an uneducated bricklayer who got lucky. The courtroom gasped. The silence was shattered by the sheer ugliness of her words. Her lawyer. Mr. Sterling put his head in his hands, realizing the case was not just lost. It was incinerated. Alana did not interrupt. She let Mackenzie dig her own grave. And yes, I wanted the money. Mackenzie continued, her face twisted and red. I deserve that money. I put up with his son for 2 years. I put up with his boring family dinners and his lectures about hard work. I earned every penny of that settlement. And now you are trying to take it all away because of one video. It is not fair. Alana waited until Mackenzie stopped panting for breath. Then she looked at the jury. No further questions, Your Honor. Mackenzie sat there, realizing too late what she had done. She had just confessed to fraud, extortion, and perjury in front of a court reporter. She looked at her lawyer, but he refused to meet her eyes. She looked at the jury, but they were looking at her with open contempt. She looked at me, sitting calmly at the defense table, and for the first time I saw genuine fear in her eyes. The rest of the trial was a formality. The closing arguments were brief. Alana simply reminded the jury that a man, life, and legacy were not toys for a greedy child to break. Mr. Sterling tried to argue for leniency, citing emotional distress, but his heart was not in it. He knew his client was toxic. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. When they returned, the foreman, a middle-aged man who looked like a schoolteacher, stood up with a grim expression. Have you reached a verdict? Justice Reynolds asked. We have, Your Honor, in the matter of Caleb. Montgomery versus Mackenzie Miller regarding the charges of defamation, fraud, and malicious prosecution. We find the defendant, Mackenzie Miller, liable on all counts. A wave of relief washed over me. It was not the fist-pumping joy of winning a football game. It was the deep exhale of a man who has been holding his breath underwater for days. Justice Reynolds nodded. She turned her gaze to Mackenzie, who was now sobbing quietly, though I suspected these tears were real tears of self-pity. Mrs. Montgomery, the judge said, her voice cutting through the room like a gavel strike. I have sat on this bench for 20 years, and I have rarely seen a case of such calculated malice. You not only wasted the court time and resources, but you attempted to weaponize the justice system to destroy an innocent man. You played on the worst stereotypes of our society to paint yourself as a victim while you were in fact the aggressor. Mackenzie looked down, her shoulders shaking. Therefore, Justice Reynolds continued, I am awarding Mr. Montgomery full damages in the amount of $2 million for defamation of character and emotional distress. Furthermore, I am ordering the immediate return of all gifts contested in the prenuptial agreement, specifically the diamond engagement ring belonging to the late Mrs. Montgomery. No, Mackenzie gasped, clutching her left hand. That is mine. You cannot take my ring. It is not your ring, the judge said sharply. It is a family heirloom, given under the condition of a marriage based on good faith. That marriage was a fraud. The ring will be returned to the bailiff before you leave this courthouse today. But I have no money, Mackenzie wailed. I cannot pay $2 million. I am pregnant. The judge paused, looking at Alana. Your Honor, Alana said, standing up regarding the pregnancy. We have filed a separate motion for a court-ordered paternity test which the defendant has refused. We believe this pregnancy may also be part of the fraudulent scheme. Justice Reynolds looked at Mackenzie with eyes that could cut glass. We will address the paternity issue in family court, the judge said. But let me be clear, Mrs. Montgomery. If that child is proven not to be a Montgomery, you will be facing additional charges for paternity fraud. For now, the judgment stands. You are to pay the damages. And I am referring the transcript of this trial to the District Attorney Office for potential criminal prosecution regarding the false police report and perjury. Bang. The gavel hit the wood, blocking out. Mackenzie protests. Court is adjourned. The courtroom erupted in noise. Reporters were shouting questions, snapping photos. I stood up slowly, buttoning my jacket. Alana turned to me and smiled, a genuine warm smile. We did it, Caleb, she said. You did it, Alana, I corrected, shaking her hand. You fought for me when no one else would. I turned to look at Mackenzie. She was surrounded by bailiffs arguing with them, refusing to take off the ring. Her lawyer was packing his briefcase, ignoring her pleas for help. Finally, a female bailiff stepped forward and held out her hand sternly. Mackenzie looked around, looking for a camera, looking for an audience to save her, but the cameras were now filming her defeat. With a scream of frustration, she yanked the ring off her finger and slammed it into the bailiff hand. She looked across the room and locked eyes with me. I hate you, she mouthed. I looked at her and felt nothing. No anger, no hate, just a profound sense of pity for a woman who had everything and threw it away because she wanted more. I turned my back on her and walked toward the exit. The heavy doors swung open and I stepped out into the hallway. The air tasted different here. It tasted like justice. I walked down the marble steps of the courthouse, the flashes of the cameras blinding me, but I did not stop to give a quote. I did not stop to gloat. I had a ring to clean and a life to rebuild. And somewhere out there, I had a son who needed to know the truth about the woman he married. I walked to my car, the weight of the last week finally lifting off my shoulders. The foundation had held. The storm had passed. Now it was time to clear the debris. Thanksgiving Day is supposed to be a time of gratitude, a time when families gather around a roasted turkey, hold hands and give thanks for the blessings of the past year. But in the affluent suburb where the Miller family lived, the air was not filled with the smell of pumpkin pie. It was filled with the biting chill of late November wind and the impending doom of a reckoning long overdue. I was parked 3 houses down, sitting in my black SUV. The heating was on low and a thermos of black coffee sat in the cup holder. I was not there to join them for dinner. I was there to serve the final course of the meal they had been cooking for years. Robert and his wife believed they were untouchable. They believed that the legal system took a holiday just because the calendar said it was Thanksgiving. They thought they had time to hide their assets, time to manipulate the bankruptcy courts, and time to find another victim to scam. But they did not know that I had been busy. While they were giving interviews to the press about my cruelty, I had been quietly acquiring their debt. Through a shell company named Retribution Holdings, I had purchased the mortgage on their house from their bank. The bank was happy to sell the toxic asset for 60 cents on the dollar, knowing the Millers had not made a payment in 6 months. I, on the other hand, did not care about the monthly payments. I cared about the foreclosure clause. And in the state of New Jersey, if you hold the note, you hold the power. At noon, exactly when most families were carving the bird, a sheriff deputy cruiser pulled up to the Miller driveway. It was followed by a moving truck. Not a luxury moving service, but a repo crew, men with thick gloves and no patience. I watched as Robert Miller opened the door. He was wearing a festive sweater, holding a glass of wine, laughing at something someone inside had said. His smile vanished the moment he saw the uniform. I cracked my window just an inch to hear the exchange. The wind carried the voices clearly. "Mr. Robert Miller?" the deputy asked, holding a clipboard. "Yes," Robert said, stepping out onto the porch, looking confused. "Is there a problem, officer?" "It is Thanksgiving. There is no problem, sir," the deputy said, his voice flat. "Merely a procedure. I have a writ of possession here issued by the Superior Court. Your mortgage holder has exercised their right to immediate foreclosure due to default and violation of the lending terms. You have 2 hours to vacate the premises." Robert laughed. It was a nervous, high-pitched sound. "You are joking." "Right. This is a prank. You cannot evict people on Thanksgiving. That is illegal." "It is perfectly legal, sir," the deputy replied, handing him the paper. "The moratorium on holiday evictions does not apply to commercial liens, and since you refinance this house under your LLC to avoid taxes, it is classified as a commercial property. The new owner wants the building secured immediately." Robert's face turned the color of ash. "New owner? What new owner? I did not sell the house. The debt was sold, sir, and the debt holder has called it in. The movers are here to assist in removing your personal effects to the curb. You can take what fits in your car. Everything else stays on the lawn until you arrange transport." Robert started screaming, telling the deputy to get off his property, threatening to sue everyone from the bank to the governor. Inside the house, I could hear Mrs. Miller shouting, asking what was going on. Then I saw Jordan. My son walked out onto the porch. He looked thinner than the last time I saw him. His expensive haircut had grown out and his shirt was unironed. He looked at the police car, then at Robert, then at the moving truck. He did not look surprised. He looked resigned, like a man who had forgotten how to hope. "Dad," Jordan said, touching Robert's arm quietly. "Dad, stop yelling. The neighbors are watching." "I do not care about the neighbors," Robert roared, shaking off Jordan's hand. "I care about my house. Get inside, Jordan. Call your father. Tell him to fix this. Tell him. I know it is him." Jordan looked down at his shoes. "Caleb is not going to answer. Dad," Jordan said softly. "He does not answer anyone anymore." The deputy stepped forward, his hand resting on his belt. 2 hours. "Mr. Miller. Or, I arrest you for trespassing on private property." The reality finally hit Robert Miller. He slumped against the doorframe, defeated. The arrogance that had fueled him for decades ran out, leaving just a hollow old man. The next 2 hours were a spectacle of tragedy and farce. The movers marched in and out carrying sofas, dining chairs, and boxes of clothes. They did not pack carefully. They dumped things on the lawn, creating a mountain of debris on the wet grass. The expensive china set that Mrs. Miller bragged about was stacked precariously on a plastic garden table. The wind whipped through the pile, blowing papers and clothes across. The yard, I watched Mrs. Miller come out carrying a roasting pan with a half-cooked turkey inside. She looked lost, wandering around the front yard looking for a table to put it on. Finally, she set it down on the hood of their leased Mercedes, staring at it as if wondering how her life had come to this. Mackenzie was the last to emerge. She was not carrying boxes. She was carrying her phone, filming the movers, screaming at them, calling them peasants and thieves. She was still trying to spin the narrative, still trying to play the victim for her online audience, but there was no signal out here. The signal jamming device I had installed in my car, a little piece of tech I used on construction sites to prevent workers from being distracted, was working perfectly. She stared at her screen in frustration, tapping furiously, unable to broadcast her misery. Jordan stood by the car, trying to load a suitcase into the trunk. He looked over at the pile of furniture on the lawn, then up at the house. It was the house where he had met Mackenzie, the house where he thought he was marrying into royalty. Now he saw it for what it was, a facade built on debt and lies. He looked across the street, and for a second his eyes locked on my black SUV. The windows were tinted dark, but he knew. He knew I was there. He did not wave. He did not look angry. He just looked tired. He turned back to the trunk and slammed it shut. The sound echoed like a final period at the end of a long, terrible sentence. I took a sip of my coffee. It was cold, but it tasted good. As the deadline approached, the internal pressure of the Miller family finally exploded. It started with a whisper, then a shout, then a scream. "You gambled it away, didn't you?" Mrs. Miller screeched, standing over Robert by the car. "You told me the mortgage was paid. You told me the business was booming. You lied to me for 20 years, Robert. I did what I had to do," Robert shouted back, waving his arms. "I was trying to keep you in the lifestyle you demanded, you and your trips to Paris. You and your fur coats. Do you think money grows on trees? It is better than being homeless," she yelled, throwing a serving spoon at him. It clattered off the pavement uselessly. "I should have left you years ago. I should have married that dentist in Boca Raton." Mackenzie stepped into the fray, pushing her mother aside. "Shut up, both of you. You are pathetic. You are losers." Robert turned on his daughter, his face purple with rage. "Watch your mouth, girl. We fed you. We clothed you. We paid for that wedding that ruined us." "You paid for nothing," Mackenzie screamed, spitting on the ground. "Caleb paid for the wedding and you ruined it. You and your greed, asking him for money, trying to blackmail him. If you had just kept your mouth shut, I would still be in the penthouse. I would still have the credit cards. But no, you had to get greedy." She turned to Jordan, who was leaning against the car, trying to make himself invisible. "And you," she hissed, pointing a finger in his face. "You are the biggest loser of them. All you promised me the world, Jordan. You promised me security. Look at us. We are standing on a sidewalk with a turkey on a car hood. You are not a man. You are a joke." Jordan looked at her. He looked at the woman he had defied his father for, the woman he had gone to jail for, the woman he had sold his soul for. "I am a joke," he said quietly, his voice carrying on the wind. "Because I loved you, loved me." Mackenzie laughed, a cruel, harsh sound. "Love does not pay the rent. Jordan, love does not buy Gucci. I am done. I am done with all of you." She grabbed her purse and started walking down the street, away from the house. away from her parents, away from my son. "Where are you going?" Robert shouted after her. "You cannot leave us here. We have no car." "The leasing company took the keys." "I do not care," Mackenzie yelled over her shoulder. "I am calling an Uber. I am going to stay with a friend. Do not call me. Do not follow me." Jordan watched her go. He took a step as if to follow her, then stopped. He realized there was no point. He realized that the woman walking away had never really been there in the first place. Mrs. Miller sat down on the curb and started to weep loud, ugly sobs. Robert stood staring at the house that was now locked and barred by the sheriff, and Jordan stood alone in the middle of the driveway looking up at the gray sky. He looked stripped down, raw. He had lost his job, his home, his wife, and his family. All in the span of 1 week. I started the engine of my SUV. The rumble of the motor turned heads. Jordan looked over again. This time he nodded. Just a small, barely perceptible nod. It was an acknowledgement, a surrender. I put the car in gear and drove slowly past them. I did not honk. I did not roll down the window. I just drove on, leaving them to their feast of consequences. I was heading to a diner, not the cheap one where I ate the burger, but a nice one near the river. I was going to order a turkey dinner with all the trimmings, and for the first time in a long time I was going to say grace, and I was going to mean every word. The rain that night was cold, freezing rain that coated the streets of New Jersey in a layer of slick, dangerous ice. It was the kind of weather that kept sensible people indoors. But my son Jordan was no longer sensible. He was a man possessed, driven by a gnawing suspicion that I had planted in his mind days ago. The seed of doubt regarding the paternity of his unborn child had sprouted into a forest of paranoia. Jordan had been sleeping in his car, a sedan he had rented with the last few dollars on a hidden emergency credit card. He had been tracking Mackenzie using the Find My iPhone feature she had forgotten to disable on their shared cloud account. He watched the blue dot on his screen move away from the friend house she claimed to be staying at and stop at a motel on the outskirts of Newark, the Galaxy Motel, a place known for hourly rates and drug deals. I was not there to see what happened next, but I read the police report and I saw the security footage later. It broke my heart, but it also confirmed everything I knew about the woman who destroyed my family. Jordan pulled into the motel parking lot at midnight. He saw Mackenzie standing on the balcony of room 204. She was not crying. She was not grieving the loss of her home or her marriage. She was laughing. She was smoking a cigarette, something a pregnant woman should never do, and leaning against the railing flirting with a man. The man was tall, muscular, and covered in tattoos. He was everything Jordan was not, rough, dangerous, and street smart. He was the man from the phone call. The man she called Baby Jordan snapped. He did not think. He did not plan. He just reacted. He ran up the metal stairs, his footsteps clanging like warning bells. Mackenzie turned and saw him. Her eyes went wide, but not with fear, with annoyance. "What are you doing here?" she asked, flicking ash onto the ground. "You are stalking me now. Who is he?" Jordan screamed, pointing at the man. "Is this him? Is this the guy you were talking to?" The man stepped forward. He was wearing a tight white tank top, and he looked at Jordan like a lion looks at a gazelle. "Go home, little boy," the man said, his voice deep and menacing. "You are interrupting." Jordan lunged. It was a pathetic attempt at a fight, a swing born of frustration and heartbreak, not skill. He threw a punch at the man's jaw, but the man dodged it effortlessly. Then the man struck back. He did not just hit Jordan, he dismantled him. He drove a fist into Jordan, stomach doubling him over, then he brought his knee up into Jordan's face. The sound of cartilage cracking was audible on the surveillance tape. Jordan fell to the concrete, gasping for air, blood pouring from his nose, but he did not stop. He tried to crawl toward Mackenzie, grabbing her ankle. "Tell me," he wheezed. "Tell me the truth. Is it my baby?" Mackenzie looked down at him. She did not help him. She pulled her foot away, kicking his hand aside. "You really want to know," she said, looking down at him with cold, dead eyes. "You want to know if that loser DNA is inside me?" Jordan looked up, blood in his teeth, waiting for the answer that would end his life. "No," she spat. "It is not yours. It never was. You were just the bank account, Jordan. This is the father." She pointed to the man who had just beaten him. The man laughed and kicked Jordan in the ribs hard. I heard the snap of bone on the audio recording. It was the sound of my son. Ribcage shattering, puncturing his lung. "Let us go," Mackenzie said, stepping over Jordan's body like he was a bag of trash. "This place is getting messy." They walked down the stairs, got into a beat-up Honda Civic, and drove away, leaving Jordan lying on the freezing metal walkway alone, bleeding and broken, under the neon sign of a cheap motel. An hour later, I got the call from the hospital. I drove there in silence, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. When I arrived, Jordan was in the emergency room, hooked up to monitors. His face was swollen purple, his nose was splinted, and his chest was wrapped in tight bandages. He was awake, staring at the ceiling with one eye, the other was swollen shut. I pulled a chair up to his bedside. I did not say, "I told you so." I did not lecture him. I just sat there, being the presence he needed. "Dad," he whispered through his split lip. She told me. She told me, it is not mine." "I know, son," I said softly. "I know." "But she could be lying," he said, a desperate tear leaking from his good eye. "She could just be saying that to hurt me. I need to know for sure. Dad, I need to know if I lost everything for a lie or for a truth." I reached into my inside jacket pocket. I pulled out a white envelope. It was sealed with the logo of the genetic testing lab. The court order Alana had filed had been expedited due to the criminal nature of the fraud case. The lab had run a rush analysis on the amniotic fluid sample Mackenzie had been forced to provide earlier that day before she fled to the motel. I held the envelope out to him. "The results came in an hour ago," said Jordan, reached out his hand, trembling, his fingers stained with dried blood. He took the envelope. He held it for a long time, staring at it as if it were a bomb. "Open it," I said. He tore the top off slowly. He pulled out the single sheet of paper. He scanned the medical jargon, skipping the technical terms, looking for the summary at the bottom. I watched his face. I saw the moment the last ember of hope was extinguished. Probability of paternity, 0.0%. The paper fell from his hand and drifted to the floor, landing softly on the sterile hospital tile. "It is not mine," he choked out a sob, racking his broken body. "It really is not mine." He turned his head away, burying his face in the pillow, and let out a sound that I will never forget. It was not a cry. It was a howl, a primal scream of a man who realizes he has been played for a fool, who realizes he has burned his own kingdom to the ground, for a woman who never loved him. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot. "You lost your job, Jordan," I said, my voice steady but gentle. "You lost your home. You lost your reputation. You humiliated your father. You stood by while she called me a racist. You almost went to prison for her. And for what?" Jordan did not answer. He just kept sobbing, his shoulders shaking. "You fell in love with a mirage." I continued, turning back to face him. "You wanted the pretty wife and the fancy life so bad that you ignored every red flag. You ignored the way she treated the waiters. You ignored the way she treated your family. You ignored the spending. You ignored the disrespect. And now you are paying the bill." Jordan looked up at me, his one good eye filled with absolute agony. "I have nothing, Dad," he whispered. "I have absolutely nothing left." "No," I said, walking over to the door. I stopped and looked back at him. "You have your life, Jordan. You are breathing. You are young. And you have a very hard lesson etched into your bones." I opened the door to leave. "Where are you going?" Jordan asked, panic rising in his voice. "Dad, do not leave me here. I cannot pay for this. The hospital bill." I looked at him, knowing this was the hardest thing I would ever have to do. I wanted to pull out my black card. I wanted to fix it. But fixing it was what got us here in the first place. "You are an adult, Jordan," I said. "You have a broken rib, not a broken spirit. Apply for Medicaid. Work out a payment plan. Figure it out." "But Dad..." I walked out into the hallway and let the door close between us, muffling his cries. I walked down the long white corridor of the hospital, listening to the squeak of my shoes on the linoleum. I felt a heavy weight in my chest, a sorrow for the boy he used to be, but I also felt a strange sense of relief. The cancer was cut out. The lie was exposed. Mackenzie was gone. The baby was not a Montgomery. Jordan was at rock bottom, and rock bottom is the only solid foundation on which you can build a real man. I walked out into the cold night air, took a deep breath, and headed for my car. Tomorrow I had a company to run, and Jordan had a life to rebuild, starting from scratch, starting from the truth. The phone rang at 2 in the afternoon. It was a burner number, unknown and untraceable, staring at me from the screen of my office phone. I was sitting at my desk, reviewing the blueprints for a new community center in Newark, trying to find solace in the straight lines and predictable physics of architecture. But the ringing persisted loud and demanding, shattering my concentration. I had a feeling I knew who it was. The rats were fleeing the sinking ship, and there was only one rat left who had nowhere to go. I picked up the receiver and said nothing. I just held it to my ear and waited, listening to the breathing on the other end. It was ragged, shallow breathing, the sound of someone on the edge of a cliff. "You think you won." "Do not you," Caleb McKenzie's voice scratched through the line. It sounded different than before. Gone was the polished arrogance of the influencer, gone was the haughty tone of the socialite. This was the voice of a cornered animal, raw and dangerous. "I did not win, Mackenzie," I said calmly. "I just stopped losing." "There is a difference." "Shut up!" she screamed. The sound was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "You took everything, my money, my reputation, my parents' house. You even turned Jordan against me. You think you can just destroy me and walk away." "You destroyed yourself," I said simply. "I just turned on the lights." "I am not done," she hissed. "And neither are you. I know where Jordan is, Caleb. I know he is in room 402 at St. Mary Hospital. Helpless, hooked up to machines with a broken rib and a shattered face. It would be so easy for someone to slip in there during visiting hours. It would be so easy to pinch an oxygen tube or slip something into his IV drip. My blood ran cold. I stood up, knocking my chair over. The calm businessman vanished, replaced by the terrifying instinct of a father protecting his cub. "If you touch him," I said, my voice, dropping to a growl low and vibrating with lethal intent. "If you even look at him, Mackenzie, there is no hole deep enough on this earth for you to hide in. I have nothing to lose." She laughed, a manic, terrifying sound. "I am broke. I am facing jail time thanks to your lawyer. Everyone hates me. I am a walking ghost. But I can still hurt you, Caleb. I can take the only thing you have left unless you pay me." How much, I asked immediately. My mind was racing, checking the time, checking my resources. I needed to keep her talking. $500,000, she said. Cash, unmarked bills. I want it tonight. I am leaving the country, and I need a fresh start. $500,000. I repeated, pretending to hesitate, pretending to calculate. That is a lot of cash to get on short notice. "Mackenzie, the banks are closing soon. You are Caleb Montgomery," she spat. "You have safes in your house. You have cash reserves. Do not lie to me. You have 3 hours. Meet me on the 4th floor of the hospital parking garage, the dark corner near the east stairwell. Come alone. If I see cops, if I see security, Jordan dies." "Do you understand?" "I understand," I said. "I will be there. Bring the money in a gym bag," she ordered. "And Caleb, do not test me. I am already dead inside. Taking Jordan with me would just be a bonus." The line went dead. I stood there gripping the phone for a long moment, letting the threat hang in the air. She was right about one thing. I did have cash reserves, and she was right about another thing. I would be at the hospital in 3 hours, but I would not be alone. I pressed the intercom button on my desk. "Alana, get the FBI on the line. Now. Tell them we have a kidnapping threat and an extortion demand regarding a federal witness. Tell them I have the time and the location." I grabbed my coat and walked out of the office. I did not feel fear anymore. I felt a grim satisfaction. Mackenzie had just made the classic mistake of the amateur criminal. She had moved from white-collar crime to violent felony. She had crossed the line from a civil lawsuit to federal jurisdiction. And by threatening a patient in a hospital, she had just signed her own warrant. I drove to the bank, not to withdraw $500,000, but to pick up a prop. I met with the bank manager, a man I had known for 30 years. We filled a black duffel bag with stacks of paper cut to the size of bills, topped with a few layers of real $100 notes. It looked heavy. It looked real. It looked like freedom to a desperate woman. I arrived at the hospital parking garage at 5:30. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the concrete pillars. The air smelled of exhaust fumes and damp oil. The fourth floor was nearly empty, just as she had predicted. I parked my car under a flickering fluorescent light and waited. I sat in the driver's seat watching the rearview mirror. The bag sat on the seat next to me. I checked my watch. 5:45. The FBI agents were already in position. They had arrived an hour ago, disguised as maintenance workers and visitors. They were watching from the stairwells, from the parked cars in the distance. They were invisible ghosts waiting for my signal. At 6 o'clock, exactly, a beat-up sedan rolled up the ramp. It was the same car I had seen on the security footage from the motel. The Honda Civic belonged to her lover, the man who beat my son. But he was not driving. Mackenzie was alone. She parked 3 spots away, leaving the engine running. She stepped out. She looked like a specter. Her hair was matted under a baseball cap. Her clothes were dirty. She looked 10 years older than she had a week ago. The stress and the malice had eaten her alive from the inside out. She walked toward my car, her hand in her pocket, clutching something terrifyingly shaped like a gun. "Get out!" she shouted, her voice echoing off the concrete walls. "Bring the bag." I stepped out slowly, holding the black duffel bag in my left hand. I kept my right hand visible, palm open, showing I was unarmed. "I have the money, Mackenzie," I said, pitching my voice to be heard by the hidden microphones I am wearing. "Just walk away. Leave Jordan alone." "Give it to me," she screamed, taking a step closer, her eyes wild and bloodshot. "You ruined me, Caleb. You owe me this. I owe you nothing," I said, walking toward her, stopping 10 feet away. "You had a home, you had a family, you threw it all away because you were too greedy to be grateful." "Shut up!" she shrieked, pulling the object from her pocket. It was a small silver pistol shaking in her grip. I said, "Give me the bag, or I go into that hospital right now and finish the job." She pointed the gun at me, then swung it toward the elevator doors leading to the hospital entrance. This was it. The threat, the weapon, the intent. "Here," I said, tossing the bag at her feet. It landed with a heavy thud. She looked at the bag greedily. Her eyes lit up with a sick triumph. She holstered the gun in her pocket and bent down to unzip the bag. She saw the stacks of money on top. She reached in, grabbing a handful of bills, bringing them to her face to smell them. "I won," she whispered, laughing hysterically. "I actually won." "You did not win, Mackenzie," I said, my voice dropping to a low, solemn tone. "You just sold your freedom for scrap paper." She looked up confused. "Scrap paper! Now!" I shouted, raising my hand. The parking garage suddenly erupted in blinding white light. Floodlights from the tactical vans parked on the ramp above snapped on, pinning her in a circle of brilliance. Sirens wailed from every direction, deafening in the enclosed space. FBI dropped the bag. "Put your hands in the air," Mackenzie screamed, dropping the money. She spun around looking for an escape, but there was none. Armored agents swarmed from the stairwells, weapons drawn, moving with terrifying precision. "Get on the ground! Now!" She froze, paralyzed by the sudden, overwhelming force. She looked at me one last time, her eyes wide with betrayal. "You tricked me!" she screamed. "You lied!" I watched as 2 agents tackled her to the concrete, forcing her hands behind her back. The gun was skittering across the floor, kicked away by a boot. I heard the handcuffs click shut for the 3rd and final time in this saga. But this time they were federal cuffs. "Mackenzie Miller, you are under arrest for extortion, conspiracy to commit murder, and possession of an unregistered firearm. You have the right to remain silent." They hauled her up. She was crying now, loud, ugly sobs, begging for mercy, begging for her mother, begging me to help her. "Caleb, please, tell them it was a joke. Tell them I was just angry." I looked at her as they dragged her toward the waiting van. I did not feel pity. I did not feel hate. I felt finished. "It is over, Mackenzie," I said quietly. "The check has cleared." I watched the van drive away, lights flashing, disappearing down the ramp, taking the chaos with it. The parking garage fell silent again. The only thing left was the black bag sitting open on the ground, the fake money fluttering slightly in the breeze. An agent walked over to me, picking up the bag. "Mr. Montgomery, are you all right?" "I am fine," I said, straightening my coat. "I am just fine. Is my son safe?" "We have agents outside his door," the man said. "He never knew a thing." "Good," I said. "Let us keep it that way." I walked back to my car, The nightmare was finally over. The monster was in a cage, and for the first time in months, I could breathe without looking over my shoulder. I started the engine and drove down the ramp heading toward the hospital entrance. I had a patient to visit and a future to build, and this time the foundation was solid rock. The water out here on the Atlantic is calm today, a deep, endless blue that matches the sky. It has been exactly 1 year since the wedding. That never happened. Since the day I walked out of the Plaza Hotel and into a war zone sitting here on the deck of my small fishing boat with the salt spray on my face and a fishing rod in my hand, I realized that war was necessary. Sometimes you have to burn the field to save the soil. My life looks very different now. Sold Montgomery Construction 3 months ago. Julian Vance paid a fair price, and true to his word, he cleaned house. He fired the sycophants. He streamlined the operations, and he made the company profitable again. I do not miss the stress. I do not miss the ringing phones or the midnight crises with suppliers. I kept enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my days. But the bulk of the sale proceeds went into a new project. I started the Caleb Montgomery Foundation. We provide full-ride scholarships to trade schools for inner-city kids. We do not just pay for their tuition, we buy their tools, we buy their work boots, and we assign them mentors, retired master carpenters and electricians who teach them not just the trade, but the character required to master it. Last week I watched a young man named Marcus receive his certification. He looked at me with tears in his eyes and told me he was the first person in his family to have a career, not just a job. That moment was worth more than every skyscraper I ever built. I spend my days differently now. I wake up when the sun rises, not when an alarm clock screams. I drink my coffee on the porch watching the birds instead of watching the stock market. I have reconnected with old friends, men I had neglected while chasing the dollar. I have even started seeing a woman, a retired school teacher named Sarah. She knows nothing about my money. She just likes that I listen when she talks and that I open doors for her. It is a quiet life, a simple life, and it is the happiest I have ever been. But the most important change is not in my bank account or my daily schedule. The most important change is in my mailbox. Yesterday I received a letter. The envelope was plain white, cheap paper, the kind you buy at a drugstore. The return address was a post office box in Houston, Texas. The handwriting was familiar but different. It was jagged, rougher than I remembered. It was the handwriting of a man whose hands are tired. It was from Jordan. I did not tear it open immediately. I let it sit on the kitchen counter while I made dinner. I ate alone, listening to jazz and looking at that white rectangle. Finally, when the dishes were washed and the house was quiet, I sat down and opened it. There was no request for money inside. There was no guilt trip. There were no excuses. Just 2 pages of lined notebook paper covered in blue ink. Dear Dad, the letter began. I am writing this from a small studio apartment in Houston. It is hot here, hotter than Jersey ever was. I am working for a commercial framing crew. We are building a new hospital complex. I start work at 5 in the morning and I finish at 6 at night. My hands are covered in blisters and my back feels like it is on fire every single day. I paused reading, imagining my son, the boy who used to complain if the air conditioning was too low, sweating under the Texas sun carrying lumber. I wanted to quit. The first week, Jordan wrote, "The foreman is a guy named Mike. He reminds me of you. He is tough. He does not tolerate laziness." He yelled at me on my second day because I was moving too slow. He told me to go home. If I was afraid of sweat, I almost walked off the job, Dad. I almost called you to beg for a ticket home. But then I remembered the look on your face in the hospital. I remembered that I had nowhere to go. So I picked up the lumber and I kept working. I smiled, a small, proud smile. "I get paid on Fridays," Jordan continued. "It is not much, just enough for rent and food and maybe a movie once a month, but Dad, when I hold that check, I feel something I never felt when I used your credit card. I feel like I own it. I feel like I earned it. I bought a used truck last month. It is ugly and it smells like wet dog. But I bought it with my own money. I changed the oil myself." Watching a YouTube video, I turned the page. The ink was slightly smudged near the bottom as if he had hesitated. "I know I hurt you, Dad," the letter said. "I know I betrayed you for a woman who was using us both. I think about that every day. Think about how I stood there and let her disrespect you. I am so sorry. I do not expect you to forgive me. I do not expect you to let me come home. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what you were trying to teach me all those years. You were not trying to be mean. You were trying to make me strong. It took losing everything for me to find my muscles. I hope you are well. Dad, maybe one day when I have saved enough money and when I have proven that I can stand on my own 2 feet, I can come visit. I would like to buy you a beer with my own money. Until then, take care of yourself. Love, Jordan. I sat there in the silence of my kitchen, holding the letter. The old Caleb might have picked up the phone. The old Caleb might have wired money to buy him a better truck or a nicer apartment. The father in me wanted to rush to Texas and hug him and tell him everything was forgiven. But I am not that man anymore, and he is not that boy. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the drawer of my desk next to my passport and my will. I did not pick up a pen to write back. I did not pick up the phone. To write back now would be to interrupt his journey. He is in the middle of the fire and he is being forged. If I pull him out now, he will be brittle forever. He needs to stay in the heat a little longer. He needs to know that he can survive without me. He needs to know that his survival is his own accomplishment. My silence is not a punishment. It is a gift. It is the final and greatest gift I can give him. Respect. I respect him enough to let him struggle. I respect him enough to believe he can make it. I walked out onto the deck and looked up at the stars. The night air was cool and clean. Good night. Jordan, I whispered into the wind. Keep swinging that hammer, son. Keep earning those blisters. I went inside and turned off the lights, ready for a peaceful sleep, knowing that miles away under a different sky, my son was finally becoming a man, and that was the only legacy that truly mattered. The wedding was erased. The money was gone. The name was tarnished, but the foundation remained, and this time it was built to last forever. I learned that providing for your children is not just about writing checks. It is about instilling values. By constantly shielding Jordan from consequences, I was not protecting him. I was crippling him. True love sometimes requires the strength to say no and the courage to let those you cherish fall so they can learn to pick themselves up. A legacy is not built on money or last names, but on integrity, resilience, and respect. If you build your life on a lie, it will eventually collapse, but the truth, no matter how painful, provides a foundation that can weather any storm. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have forgiven Jordan sooner, or did I do the right thing by letting him struggle? Let me know in the comments below. And if you believe in the power of self-respect, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories like this.